Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
With Robb Flynn.
What up? What up? What up? Podcast party. People, how you doing? How you living? If you're watching on YouTube, look at those lights. Look at that light action I got going. Yeah, baby. I got a little light show happening here. Changing colors, setting the... Ooh, look, it's all purple right now. Setting the vibe, setting the mood. I almost said vood. Setting the vood. Setting the mood. Setting the vibe. I just woke up from a little nap. I woke up at 5:15 a.m. today, man. What the fuck? It's not rock and roll. It's not rock and roll to wake up that early. So I took a little power nap. Laid down. You know how I roll. I roll for about 20 minutes. Go to sleep for about 20 minutes. That's it. And then after that, if I can wake up, recharged, synapses are firing, brain is ready to rock, ready to podcast, man. That's what I'm ready to do. Man, I got this is a long one. For a dude, you guys probably don't even have a clue. You're going to be like, 3 hours with who? We did this yesterday. I'm doing the intro the next day. I was like, I can't do the intro today. I got to fucking get out of here. Ryan J. Downey, who many of you may know. He's a band manager. He does a list of compiling all of the Soundscan and the stream. Soundscan's not really a thing anymore, so they call it something else now. But they takes all the CD sales and the streaming sales and the whatever metrics, combines it, adds it up, sends it out in a little newsletter, and it's kind of what he's known for now. But in a bunch of bands, used to manage Bleeding Through. I met him when he managed Bleeding Through, managed Throwdown, and good dude. Great conversation. Really well-spoken dude, like a really smart dude. And yeah, if you just want to tune in for an awesome conversation with, I know it's not going to be Dino from Fear Factory or Head from Korn, but this is a good one. It's a really great conversation. Let's see. I guess the big news in the metal world is that Dave Ellefson, my guest of, I swear to God, I just want to say he was on here like a few months ago. He was in Megadeth at that point. He's no longer in Megadeth due to an ongoing online sex scandal. I don't really know what it. I don't know if it's I keep on reading the word sex scandal. I don't know. He was jerking off some cute young pussy, some 17, 18, 19-year-old pussy. And she recorded him, as a 19-year-old is probably going to do. But I don't know if it's, I guess cheating, but he didn't have sex. He's just basically jerking off. Which is why I'm always just like, just porn. Just watch porn. Don't interact with anybody. All those, like, they always want to have the chat sites and the chat cams, all those fucking cams pop up. Chatterbait. It's like you can masturbate and chat at the same time. I was like, I don't know. I don't want anyone to see what I'm doing. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to just go down whatever porn rabbit holes I go down. But, yeah, I guess he's out, man. There was an interesting comment, though, on it. I got to say, the one most interesting comment in the whole, it was a release from Dave Mustaine, and he was saying that due to along with ongoing interpersonal issues or something like that, or no, what was it? An ongoing strained relationship, basically implying that there was already a strained relationship, which was kind of news to me. I was like, oh, wow, crazy. I mean, he's been back in Megadeth now for a long time. I think 3 albums now, or maybe more. So, yeah. It was crazy. It was a doozy. It was a doozy of a week. Not that surprising, I guess. A bunch of my friends had texted me like, "Think he's out?" I was like, I don't know. Like, don't ask me. I have no idea. Like, I mean, in my opinion, like, it was already kind of over. Like, it's been 2 weeks since. And if you haven't seen the video, I think they've all been taken down. But go try and find them if you can. They're probably on YouPorn at this point. But Jesus Christ. Old Ellefson, man, 56 years old. He's fucking firing off loads like a porn star. I was like, holy shit, look at that. My loads ain't that big. Fuck. Good for you at 56, Dave Ellefson. Yeah, fucking porn star size loads. Fucking hell. But at this point, that was 2 weeks ago. Like, it kind of all died down. There wasn't really anything going on about it. I mean, maybe there was more. I don't know, but it just seemed like it was. I think by the time the tour starts in whatever July, like, it would be completely. You might get a couple of little smartasses up front with some kind of like, let me see your cock, or who knows what the fuck. I saw your cock on fucking the internet. I don't know, or it probably would have been. It doesn't seem like anything really lasts longer than 2 weeks in the main news cycle, let alone the heavy metal news cycle. So probably would have been gone. It might have been gone. I don't have any music to play for my guest that I've got going on. I've got no intro. I've got no fucking once again, I've got no fucking commercials in my podcast. No ads. No nothing. No money being made. But yeah, he was in a band called Burn It Down, but I'm not really familiar with Burn It Down, and I didn't want to just go and play like some shit. I don't even know if Burn It Down is Burn It Down on fucking Spotify. Let me look. I've already said there's no music, so even if there is, I'm not gonna fucking play it. I'm just gonna be like, go search it out yourself, man. Go search it out yourself. Oh, there's only a song. What is this? Yeah, there's a bunch of songs called Burn It Down. Linkin Park has a song called Burn It Down. Skillet has a song called Burn It Down. AWOL Nation has a song called Burn It Down. Five Finger Death Punch has a song called Burn It Down. Oh, it looks like there is an artist called, oh, they do. Look at this. All right, now I guess I got to play it. Fuck, I found it. Let's see. This is the number one. No, this is the number one song. Kill Their Idols. Ooh, kind of 10-ton hammery. Cool, there you go. I told you I was not going to play any songs. Not going to. Just that's all you get. Burn It Down, though. Artist, 229 monthly listeners. They got 6,000 streams on Spotify. Did you hear me go into my English accent there? Spotify. Spotify. When you got to say foy. And then if you're from London, you say everything with an F. Everything. If you listen to that Bring Me the Horizon record, everything is all over there. Something. I love it. It's great. I love it, man. Max does that too. Everything. I see the world old. I see the world. That's not a thing, but I don't know. He says everything too. Anyway, this is a long interview. I'm not going to do a big old intro here, but this is a great chat. It's a crack a beer or, crack a water, or you're probably at work listening to this, or maybe you're driving. I know a lot of truck drivers A lot of dudes driving trucks right to me, and they're like, dude, I listen to your shit on my shift. It's awesome. So dig in, gentlemen. You go all over the place, and I will I'll check you out. Here right now is the mighty Ryan Downey. Ryan Downey.
Yo.
What is happening?
Yo, Mr. Flynn, the general. It's good to see you.
I'm loving your bifocals.
Thank you. I'm glad that civilization is advanced enough that they're not total Coke bottles.
Yeah.
You know?
I think they actually have trifocals now, don't they? Have you heard that?
I've heard the phrase, right? Gosh, so what would that be?
I don't know what your
vision's different everywhere. Yeah.
You can't see shit.
Yeah.
That's for the I can't see shit.
Yeah, trifocals is just
population.
Full Ray Charles. That's just the black Ray-Bans.
Right. I'm liking the facial hair too. I don't know if you're always a lot of pictures of you clean cut.
Yeah. Usually clean shaven. This is more of my quarantine look, I guess.
Still got the quarantine vibe.
Still got the quarantine vibe.
Awesome.
And the quarantine 15, which is helpfully cropped out of this frame here.
Yeah, that's been a tough part of quarantine, right? Like just not able to keep the weight off.
Yeah,
it's hard.
I mean, I was a bit of a homebody already. I would go out to shows. I like to go out and see comedy. I have my little tight circle of people, but I still went out way less than most people, and I work from home.
Yeah.
And so quarantine was less of a transition in that sense, but was also more of an excuse to order Postmates 3 times a day. And you know what I mean? Just get a little too nuts.
I lucked out. I was going to this gym, and it was a mostly outdoor gym already to begin with. So like, half the workout would be outside, kind of like carrying tires and, pushing prowlers and shit like that.
Yeah.
And then even the part that was inside with the weights was still like, it's in a warehouse. So it's like 2 giant roll up doors. And so there was always air going through there, whether it was hot or cold or whatever anyway. And so, they were able to stay open, pretty much the whole pandemic. And then even when they couldn't, they just kind of moved everything out to be outdoors. So you'd just be doing bench press outdoors and shit like that.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that was really I never could have planned that, but it worked out really good.
Yeah, that's great.
Being able to just do that, kept me sane so many times during the pandemic.
Yeah, I do Muay Thai at a place that's walking distance from my house, and I stopped going when the pandemic started. And obviously I'm not mentioning any names here, but my instructor was just full on COVID denier, secretly reopened pretty quickly.
Okay.
And he was doing the come on in. And I was like, you do what you need to, but I'm not coming back yet. Right. So I still haven't been back, but I am looking forward to getting back to that soon. Cause that was keeping me sane also.
Can you do Muay Thai with a mask on?
I mean, technically you could, but I just can't imagine. And it's so, if you're going to spar, it's close contact and you're sweating on each other. And,
right.
And I mainly at this point was going for cardio. So it was a lot of kickboxing, a lot of bag work.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, you're 2 bags away from you with somebody else blowing sweat and saliva all over their bag. So
right.
at an abundance of caution, I was like, it might be safe, but it just wasn't worth the risk to me without getting into the whole, everyone's divisive opinions and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I hear you.
Yeah.
Are you so when you do Muay Thai, are you going for a belt? Are you moving up like that, or is it just an exercise?
Plenty of people do, and a lot of people do it for sport. For me, I actually got interested in hand-to-hand combat via Krav Maga, which I guess would have been, about 10 years ago. And it was, I did
Krav Maga.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a fighting system designed by the Israeli Special Forces. This guy, Emi Lichtenfield, I think was his name, who was actually from the Czech Republic area. But anyway, he was a guy who developed this fighting system that eventually made its way around the world. But basically the idea of it is that it combines the quickest to learn and most brutally effective techniques from all of the world's different fighting styles, and it's constantly evolving in that way.
Oh, cool.
And the idea is that rather than something like, say, jujitsu, which is more of a sport and you're going in a ring and there's a referee and you're trying to get points and there's illegal moves and things you can and can't do, this is more like, oh, it's 4 a.m. I'm in a Ralph's parking lot and a meth head is coming with a box cutter. Like, how do I get out of this situation safely and get home to my family, you know?
I don't know why, but that just sounded like that authentically happened to you.
I was gonna say, like, it's kind of a real world example, right? So yeah, it's that sort of thing where, you know, and I was never a tough guy. I never went looking for fights, and obviously going to hardcore shows as a teenager and in my early 20s, it's kind of unavoidable.
Right.
But it was really more looking for those situations where, you know, you just don't know what's going to happen. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, and you know what I mean? It's like, there's just, it's funny actually, that the week before I went to my first Krav Maga lesson, some dude got mad at me on the freeway. I don't know what I did, but was doing the, like, you know, getting up on my bumper and yelling behind me and telling me to pull over. It was just one of those moments where it's like, you have all that, you know, machismo and everything programmed in you that tells you, like, you should pull over and fight this dude. And then you also have the thing that's like, I've got kids now, you know, and like,
right.
And what happens if this dude just stabs me at a gas station? Like, this is it. This is how my life ends,
Right.
you know, over this. I don't even know what happened, you know? And that sort of motivated me to, like, I kind of just want to know, you know. So yeah, I saw a show on the Discovery Channel. It was called Human Weapon, and it was an MMA fighter and an ex-NFL player who went around the world. And each episode was that. It was a really cool show. It didn't last long. But they would go to different parts of the world and spend a couple weeks training in that world's most well-known fighting style, and then fight somebody well-versed in that style at the end of the episode. It was a really cool setup.
Wow. That's cool.
And I was watching it just as a viewer, like, no interest in, like, learning a martial art. And then they got to the Krav Maga episode where they went to Israel, and I saw them doing gun takeaways and knife defense, and something just clicked. And I had a neighbor at the time who our mutual friend Dave Peters from Throwdown, we nicknamed my neighbor Bodum Neighbor, because this is the first house I ever owned, is in the suburbs, nice little cul-de-sac, all, you know, soccer moms and cops and stuff on my street. And there was a guy who I would see going to check his mail every day who would always be wearing a different Children of Bodum shirt.
Okay.
And one day I just started talking to him, and I was like, my friend and I nicknamed you Bodum Neighbor, because when he's over, like, we see you. And it was just, he stood out, you know. But turned out Bodum Neighbor trained in Krav Maga at a place,
oh, wow,
right where I lived at the time. So he got me going there. And so anyway, a long-winded answer to your question is that training in Krav, which some schools have a belt system there, that's what got me into Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu and things like that, and Judo. It's all folded into Krav.
Okay.
But Muay Thai I got more into just for the workout. I like the bag work and all that stuff. Whereas Krav was more technique and, you know, real world situations and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I like that. I took jujitsu as a kid, and so I'm kind of fascinated when people do it. I didn't stick with it. I stuck with it till I was about 13, 14. I got to be an orange belt, so about halfway.
Yeah,
you know, I was fucking crazy OCD obsessed with it. Like, I wanted to be Bruce Lee. I'd get there a half an hour early. I'd stay at 45 minutes after, you know, like, I was crazy about it.
That's kind of the problem with our type of personality, right? The blessing and the curse, because you get, like, really into it, and then if you slip up even a little, you're like, I'm totally over it. That's what I do.
Well, we moved. I had a great teacher, this guy named Wally J, and he had an awesome dojo out here in Alameda. And my dad would take me up, and we lived not that far from Alameda at the time. And he was super inspiring. Like, he just brought a lot of confidence out of me, and he would stay and spar with me afterwards, and he'd always just be like, "You're strong like bull." He just said, like, repeated that, like drilled it into my head.
Yeah.
And then we moved away, and we tried to go, but it was just hella far. Like, it was over an hour now to get to Alameda. I was living in Fremont, and so my dad was like, "Hey, why don't we try another dojo down here?" And so we tried a dojo down in Newark, and it wasn't like it was just like the high school gym with some pads and and it was just kind of ghetto and not ghetto in the sense that, like, this was Alameda was ghetto too, but it had like a structure to it. It had like a feel, like there was a vibe. This was just like dudes, and I was 13 and they were 15, and that doesn't sound like that big of a difference, but like, I am a gangly 13-year-old, and these are like 15-year-old dudes going into men. They're big and they've got muscles, and we're sparring, and they're fucking beating the shit out of me. I mean, like, just crushing me. Like, and I was like, "Whoa, holy shit!" And I got rattled by it, and my sensei demoted me from an orange belt to a yellow belt, and so that was the moment where I was like, "I'm over this. Fuck this dude." Yeah.
What's interesting, I think about this often, that age range in your teens, especially, it's like, once you're an adult, I'm friends with people who are 10 years older than me, 10 years younger than me, and we seem like about the same age. But when you're a kid, I remember my first hardcore band, 3 of us were 15 and our drummer was 19. And we called him Uncle Keith. Because, like, he was like a man, he had like a 5 o'clock shadow and like lived in his own place with his chick, and and we were like kids, and it's like now that 4-year age gap is like nothing. But at the time it was like, we've got this like old dude playing drums.
When I was in Forbidden, we were 16, and Russ Anderson was our, the singer for Forbidden Evil, Russ Anderson. We got him in the band. He joins this band of like really young, 16 years old. He's 21, and we were like, sweet, he can buy booze. Like, we were stoked, but it was always like strange to me too. Like, we always gave him those kind of nicknames because we were just like, dude, you're hanging out with like 16-year-olds. This is crazy. Like, you're 21 years old. But he just loved it, and he wanted to be in a band, and we were fucking young and hungry and ready to fucking do it. So we did. Andy Biersack, when he was doing Black Veil Brides as a teenager in Ohio, one of his first drummers in the band was one of his dad's buddies who was like 46, and Andy was like 14 or 15. Wow. And he always jokes about it now, looking back, where he's like, that guy's a way better person than me, because he's like, I wouldn't do that now. If a 14-year-old asked me to sing for their band, he's like, looking back, that was so nice of that guy, like helping out his buddy's kid. Totally. That's pretty rad. Yeah. Those guys are from Ohio? Andy's from Ohio. Okay. Yeah. Good. And he started a version of the band there and told all of them, the minute I turn 18, I'm moving to LA to do the band. You're all welcome to come with me, but I'm going with or without you. Yeah. And not one of those dudes came out here with him. Oh, wow. He came out here, lived in his car, and put the whole band together again with all new dudes. Wow. And of course, all the dudes in Ohio, once the band got big, sued him. Oh, really? Yeah. Wow. Classic case of, hey, if all the good ideas were yours, why haven't you had another good idea since? Yeah. They're all just these like losers. I should have him on the podcast. I bet you he'd be good to hear his story. He'd be really great, and I know he's one of my closest friends. I know he always appreciated you being one of the cred metal dudes who, after the Golden Gods thing came out, and you were like, you know what, like, that guy kicked a lot of ass at that. You had his back when he came out. Totally. I was like, everybody here is a fucking douchebag. Fuck all these people. Like, this dude just fucking won an award. Like, a fan voted award. Yeah. It was so fucking lame. I was like, what the fuck is everybody's deal here? Like, yeah. And for a song that was about his grandfather who passed away the year before, and he had this whole speech about his grandfather that he was going to come out and give, and then he comes out and
all these like, middle-aged construction workers are like spitting on him.
Yeah, it was so
Yelling
fucking
at him.
harsh. I was like, what in the fuck is going on? I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Those things are always weird to me anyway. So
Yeah, indeed. And I'm always attracted to those personalities as an audience member. I like when Oasis played the MTV VMAs and Liam Gallagher like spit on the stage and was like just like contempt for the whole thing. And
right.
I've always appreciated like an Axl Rose or the unpredictable kind of dangerous artists that are you get the sense that they're good people and that if you're on their good side, it's cool to be around. But there's also like a discomfort where you're like, this person could just like pop off.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought Andy had a little bit of that edge going back then.
You had the amazing life that you've probably interviewed so many of those people just along the way.
I have had that opportunity. And speaking of Oasis, actually, who are one of my favorite bands of all time, which is why I'm the person. As soon as Lars started talking about Oasis, I'm like, yeah, see, everybody. My actual favorite band of all time.
It's okay to like metal and like Oasis.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you like Champagne Supernova Oasis, or are you like?
I celebrate the whole catalog, as they say.
Okay.
Okay. In fact, I really like the later lineup when they had Ringo Starr's kid playing drums, and one of the dudes from Ride was in the band. I know people pine for that original lineup and the classic lineup, and I know this is a very shallow thing to say, but I always appreciated how much cooler the later Oasis lineup looked. Because the Gallagher brothers always looked cool, and then they ended up with Andy Bell and all these other dudes who looked just as cool as they did. Original lineup wasn't so cool looking. But funny story. This is a podcast. I guess this is a place to tell this kind of story, right?
Yeah, this is it's called No Fucking Regrets. I got anything you want. There's no,
My first week working full time for MTV News. I had been freelancing for them for about 2 years. That's a whole other story, but it was my first week in the office on the West Coast in the Santa Monica office. My office mate, by the pure luck of the draw, was a guy who had grown up in Iowa and had just moved here. And I grew up in Indiana, and I had just moved here also. And I didn't spend much time in Iowa, but there's something about two dudes in LA at MTV
in the Midwest,
about the same age, but yeah, having an office together. There's like, we might as well have grown up next door.
Right.
We just immediately just understood each other. And so him and I are kind of getting to know each other. And I had been hired actually to cover movies. I was a movie reporter. I was actually the only movie reporter at the time, at a time when MTV News wasn't sure if they wanted to even keep doing movie coverage. They had scaled all the way down to like, it was just me, which was kind of a blessing and a curse because I had a lot of carte blanche to basically go everywhere and cover everything. Like I went to Tokyo to interview Sarah Michelle Gellar. And
that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I went to Prague to the set of the first Hellboy movie and was going back and forth to Canada all the time for like
the budget was fucking the budget.
Yeah, and the studios paid for that stuff.
Yeah, right. That's
because if you're CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, there's the journalistic ethics where you're not flown to things.
Oh, really?
MTV didn't have that hangout, so if Sony wants to fly you to Japan, then they're more than what, Dude, I mean, tough day at the office. I got flown to the Bahamas to interview Jessica Alba and Paul Walker for some crappy movie they made. And I'm just like, in the Bahamas for 4 days. All
expenses paid.
All expenses paid. And there's a lot of, like I said, a blessing and a curse because it was nice to have carte blanche to do all of that. But at the same time, not a lot of support within the organization from people who cared at all that I was doing any of it. So
are you like a one-man show? Like you're editing it, you're putting, you have a crew.
Usually editing it, we came back usually using local crews on those remotes, but field producing and doing the interviews and usually with that international stuff, especially usually by myself. Right. And it was really in that period of, because I was there full time from 2002 to 2004. And it was really during that period of transition still from the broadcast space to the digital space where I might come and spend 2 hours with Robb Flynn and Machine Head, and you guys might be like, man, MTV News was here for 2 hours. This is killer. And we hit it off and it's all great. And then, a 2-second soundbite and a story about Ozzy Osbourne when you're like, Ozzy rules is all that ever shows up anywhere. That was, and that was often kind of soul crushing for me, because there were a lot of situations. God bless the podcast format, because it's right where I live and it's right where I wanted to be back then, Right. I was going to tell you. So my first week in the office, my buddy Corey Moss, we're sitting in there. I'm a movie guy. We start talking about music. He finds out that I'm like also a music dude, and which was his beat. And he goes, hey man, I have this interview I'm supposed to do today and I'm double booked. I have to do something else. Do you think you could cover it for me? And I'm like, sure. And he's all, yeah, do you remember that band from the 90s, Oasis? And I'm like, dude, that one of my favorite bands of all time. I was like, I have a wall-sized Oasis poster rolled up in that corner over there that I haven't hung in our office yet. And he's like, oh, well, perfect. I think they were playing Coachella. But he was like, yeah, I'm supposed to interview Noel Gallagher at this hotel in Santa Monica. It's like 2 hours from now.
The two brothers are still in the band at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it was one of those, my first week on the job, one of my biggest heroes, one of my favorite songwriters.
Are you nervous as
and a really intimidating person to interview. Yeah.
Right. Not an easy interview.
Quick-witted and sharp and opinionated.
Could be wasted.
Yeah, exactly. Could be my worst nightmare. And
are you nervous? Or are you just like, I got this?
You know what? I wasn't nervous until because I did go with a couple colleagues from the office because it was local. So I had a camera person and a field producer that went with me, and they made us late. And so we were about 10 minutes late.
Okay.
And as we walked in, I'll never forget it. The first time I laid eyes on Noel Gallagher, he looked at me and he goes, and I was just like, oh, this is off to the worst start. And then it was awesome, dude. He was killer. It was so killer. And it was also a really great lesson I'd already been doing fanzines. I was already a professional journalist. I'd written for national mags and stuff at that point. I'd actually had interviewed you during the Burning Red era prior to that. Oh,
wow. Crazy.
Yeah, which I don't know if you even remember that. But
I don't remember that at all. Wow.
But yeah, we'll talk about that too. But yeah, it was a great lesson in my sort of developing story, and something that I tell other journalists often when this kind of stuff comes up in conversations, and artists, because I also do a little side hustle of media training. And just showing that you have that little bit, demonstrating, and I would love to hear you speak to this as an artist, right? As soon as you demonstrate that you are just a little bit informed about the person you're talking to, it creates a lot of trust and allows the person to relax, versus the person that comes in the room and they're like, yeah, so you guys are like heavy metal, right? Where you're just immediately sort of put on guard, where you're like, this is a waste of my time,
Yes.
This person doesn't give a shit.
Totally.
And me being such an Oasis super fan and almost having expectations lowered at that time by being from MTV, right? Because most artists, especially then, were just excited to get the MTV opportunity, even at the upper levels. And they didn't really expect much from the person from MTV that was showing up, because frankly, while I worked with a lot of great people who went on to do great things and are still good friends, I also worked for some people that couldn't name all four Beatles,
right.
And that was like kind of expected. So they would see me coming and not really expect a lot. So I always loved in those situations, like with a Noel Gallagher, where we're late already and whatever, and he probably doesn't really want to do it, but it's MTV, for me to sit down and start dropping some stuff in my first couple of questions that just demonstrates that I know stuff about him,
Okay.
and that I'm interested. Then it's like he immediately opens up, and, we had a really killer interview.
What's your opening question to Noel Gallagher? Do you remember?
Man, that's a good question. I don't.
No.
But I do remember him. It's 2002, and I do remember him having a lot of fun things to say about Fred Durst. He said that all the American rock bands needed to have a shave and put on some proper trousers.
Some proper trousers.
Have a shave, put on some proper trousers. But yeah, he was great. I mean, yeah, perfect example.
It's such a snarky thing to say, but it sounds so fucking proper that it does.
Yeah,
doesn't sting that bad, but you're like
the accent and the slang sort of lends it this air of authority.
Right.
Sounds professorial, even though it's just talking smack.
Totally.
Yeah, and I did kind of a similar thing the first time I ever interviewed Metallica, and the only time I've interviewed James Hetfield was for MTV.
I love this story. I heard you tell this story before
on the podcast before.
And I read an interview while I was researching you, just like I read this version of your story, but I'd love for you to tell it because I think it's
cool.
Great. Such a great story.
I feel I'm flattered that I have a repertoire.
You're not the easiest guy. There's another guy named Ryan Downey out there that's like a musician or something.
There's two of them. There's
so many fucking interviews out there with those Ryan Downeys. I was like, what the fuck is going on?
And there's a couple points of confusion because there's a Ryan Downey in Las Vegas who's a tattooer, and my older brother Jeff Downey is a tattooer in Indiana.
Okay.
And so often this happens to him where he'll be like, yeah, my little brother Ryan, and they're like, oh, Ryan Downey. And, yeah, Ryan Downey, my brother, and they're like, oh yeah, the tattooer in Vegas. Of course, you guys are brothers. It's like, no, it's a different guy. When I had my first professional journalist job, assistant music editor at the weekly paper in Indianapolis, I got a promo pack back in the promo pack days, CD 8x10 photo, hard copy bio of an artist that had been discovered by Elton John and signed to Elton John's imprint, Rocket Man Records.
Oh wow, I didn't even know that was a
thing. Yeah, it's back when Weiland had an imprint. Everybody had an imprint.
It's a thing to do.
It's a thing to do. Give somebody a label. And the guy's name was Ryan Downey. Downe, no Y, but it was pronounced Ryan Downey. And he was like an alt rock 90s, like a little swoopy hair and like a suit and like, singer songwriter, alternative guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, and I was listening to Howard Stern at the time, and they would have Mark L. Wahlberg on a lot. And then there was another guy, Howard K. Stern, that was like a lawyer.
Okay.
And so I thought, this guy's going to become famous and I'm going to be fucked, right? Like I'm going to be Michael Bolton in Office Space. That's when I started using my middle initial in my byline.
Okay, gotcha.
That was the moment I became Ryan J. Downey, was in case that Ryan Downey became famous.
Okay. So
that's why I've had the pretentious middle initial ever since. Unluckily for him and luckily for me, that guy did not go off. But I have looked him up since, and he apparently became a producer and has had he's had a nice career, but didn't become a pop star or whatever. But yeah, now there's another pop star. I think he's Australian or something.
Yeah.
And it's spelled the same way.
Yes.
There's a Ryan J. Downey who has the Instagram handle, and I found him on Facebook. And the guy was so nice that I've been too polite to ask him for the Instagram handle, which was originally why I contacted him. But he's just super nice. I just hit him up. He's here in Orange County.
Oh, wow.
Like he's like this blonde-haired, blue-eyed, perfect teeth Mormon dude. He's got like a beautiful wife and all these kids. And he's like, oh, that's so neat. We have the same name, And I'm just like, man, I can't I want to ask this dude for his Instagram.
You still live right around the corner from Josh Wilbur?
Yeah. We're really close by to each other. Yeah.
Right on.
Me and him are here, and Greg from Dillinger, Steve Evitz, Joe Escalante from the Vandals. Cool. There's like a little community of us that are like kind of
I was doing some mixing over with him, and he's like, oh yeah, I think you and I ended up just texting randomly.
Yeah.
I'm with Josh Wilbur. I live right next to Josh Wilbur.
Yeah, because we're all in an area that not a lot of other people are in, and for a decade I lived in Temecula, which is one town over from where Des lives.
Okay.
And him and I have talked more since I moved away. Like there was like a decade where people always assumed him and I knew each other, and we didn't really know each other then. But that we would hear a lot that the other one lived there. And then we actually got to know each other like way after I had moved away. But yeah, when there's like a kind of small town where there's not a lot of people in our thing, then you know all the people in our thing that are around you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
you were talking about the Metallica, the time
yes.
The only time you've ever interviewed James Hetfield.
The only time I've ever interviewed James Hetfield, which fits right into that blessing and a curse. Well, I was going to say, kind of to answer your question, I don't remember what the first Noel Gallagher question was, but I know, to my point about establishing trust, walking into the room with James and Kirk, being the guy from MTV, with like a faux hawk and like an 18 Vision shirt or something, knowing that there's not going to be a lot expected from me, I name dropped Exodus in my first question. And there's a visible moment of Kirk going like, oh, okay, like, all right. Like, this dude from MTV knows a little something. And it's disarming, it kind of creates like okay. Yeah, so that story goes like this. Kurt Loder conducted what turned out to be the last interview with Johnny Cash at his place in Nashville. It was the Video Music Awards. The video for Hurt, directed by Mark Romanek, was up for Video of the Year.
Oh, wow.
It lost to Justin Timberlake, Cry Me a River, which even Justin Timberlake was upset by. And for the MTV News pre-show, we ran Kurt's interview, and then as a supplemental piece, a bunch of sound bites from different artists who had been inspired by Johnny Cash. So one of the amazing things I got to do is I interviewed Audioslave was happening at the time, and I interviewed Chris Cornell and Tom Morello about Johnny Cash. So, and they were separated. So, I got to just sit down with Chris Cornell for 30 minutes.
I love this story.
Johnny Cash.
I heard this story too. This story is so good.
Yeah, it was amazing. And
let me see if I'm summarizing this.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like he ends up at the same hotel after Johnny Cash covers Rusty Cage. They end up at the same hotel somehow. And Johnny reaches out to his people, or Johnny's people reaches out to his people and goes, "Hey, I'd love to meet you," and gives him his number and give me a call.
Yeah.
Chris Cornell goes into his bedroom, is just staring at the phone, looking at the number, I can't dial this number.
Yeah. And I was like, "Why? You never called him?" And he was like, "No." And I was like, "Why not?" And he goes, "Because what do you say to God?" Yeah, probably that's like a top 10 interview moment for me ever. And by the way, it never ran anywhere. And this is where the blessing and the curse comes from. There's not
this story never ran on the MTV.
That interview never ran. Yeah. There's like a half a sentence from Cornell in this 5-minute Kurt Loder Johnny Cash interview. And I love Kurt Loder is one of my idols, by the way, on a number of levels. And the interview, his interview is incredible. But that was just sort of the game then too, is, I was cutting stories. I'd be sitting in edit bays, with 40 minutes of footage from some great interview, trying to cut a 50-second hit for TRL.
Right.
For the moment where Carson Daly's like, and now, Suchin Pak is going to tell us about blah, blah, blah. And then I write the 10 seconds of her intro, and then it throws to, a 40-second piece for my 40-minute interview.
Wow.
And then it disappears forever.
Yeah.
It's never seen again.
It's never and will it never be seen?
I found one of the editors or producers who worked on that Johnny Cash piece actually posted it on YouTube, which I think is renegade, right? I don't even think that's legal technically. But even that is it's just the 4-minute piece. It's not Loder's whole interview with Cash, which I'm sure was incredible. It's the last one.
Right.
And dude, the most depressing thing is Papa Het. He's not even in it at all.
Oh, they just show Kirk? There's
1 second of Kirk and 0 seconds of Hetfield.
Crazy.
And this is where the blessing and the curse thing comes in, because, I get flown to Salt Lake City, because that was the closest Metallica was going to be to the West Coast or the East Coast. And I'm so psyched, obviously. They're my favorite band in the world. And they fly me out there. I use a local news crew. I get to set up the interview in their jam room, which, you know, back then it wasn't as well known as it is now, the like Metallica tuning room that they have at every show.
Yeah.
So I'm in the tuning room which I hadn't heard of yet. And I'm in there for the first time, you know, and it's like moving Hetfield's guitars around to set up the shot. You know, it's just crazy, you know.
Don't drop the guitar.
Don't drop the guitar. Don't knock anything over.
That's all you're telling yourself.
Exactly.
Don't fucking break Hetfield's guitar.
Yeah, that was the weirdest. You would talk about nerve-wracking. The weirdest moment was once we're all set up. There's like that 5 or 10 minute gap between like, okay, we're ready for them,
right?
And they're not in here yet,
mm-hmm.
And that's just like, that's one of the most insane feelings in the world. The only thing I could probably liken it to, it's probably, I don't know, what you might feel like, maybe about to go back out for the encore. Or so that just like adrenaline of like, I know it's not yet, but it's about to happen. You know, like I'm supposed to just be sitting still right now, but I can't. Like, it's just like a weird, tense, exciting, terrifying.
Yeah.
Because you're busy beforehand, so you're not really thinking about anything except what you're doing, and then when you're just sitting there, all you're thinking about is what you're about to do.
This is the first time that you've met them too. This is the first time you meet Metallica.
Yeah.
So you'd never gotten an autograph at a show.
Meet and greet. Nothing.
Gotcha.
So that was intimidating. And then the two of them come in, and they didn't have anybody with them. It was just them. And they sit down, and as you know, most fans and friends are well acquainted with now, Kirk is very charming and very easygoing, and you know, immediately made me feel comfortable. And Hetfield's an intimidating guy, you know. I don't think he means to be. It's just, you know, childhood experience and, you know, all that stuff we relate to, that we love about, you know, his art. That's part of it. And then you put your own expectations in it. And then also, again, this was, you know, 2003, maybe. We're coming, you know, this is some kind of monster, saying anger. Yeah. Post rehab. Like, this is like a really kind of fragile, interesting, transformative, weird moment for them. Wow. Robb's still relatively new to the band.
Coming off of a record that's not very well received.
Not very well received.
Which is probably, you know, weird for them.
The whole thing, right? So, but who knows what's in their heads? That's all in my head, you know. And it's really a gift knowing that we have this very focused topic of like, we're just talking about Johnny Cash for 30 minutes.
Right. It's not like you're doing a history of Metallica or
what
happened? You know?
Yeah,
why so thrashy, then not thrashy? Whatever. You know?
Yeah, I'm not doing any like. So have you guys heard the new Megadeth record? What do you think about it? You know, there's nothing provocative. So we talk about Johnny Cash. It's amazing. Hetfield tells amazing stories. They had also, speaking of the Saint Anger era, they had just done that music video in prison. And so we talked, you know, about Johnny Cash live in San Quentin, and you know, there were a lot of parallels there. And Hetfield talked about the whole just experience of being in the prison and that sort of thing. And it was all killer. And then the two moments that I remember the most, which happened off camera, is as we were finished, the local crew was packing up. Hetfield and Kirk were about to leave the room. And I had my moment where, and I don't know exactly what I said, but I had my moment where I got to like tell Hetfield, you know, like, dude, you know, I grew up a poor blue collar kid. My mom passed away when I was young. My dad vanished on us for years. Ride the Lightning saved my life. You know, that moment that like when you're a fan of it, and you've probably been blessed with, you know, 100 times, 1,000 times, as Robb from Machine Head, when you know, someone gets to say their thing, you know, and it wasn't, you know, I didn't punish him. It wasn't like, you know, it was like 60 seconds, you know, concise, but I definitely, as I was getting towards the end of it, felt myself getting a little, you know, and he gave me exactly what you would want from James Hetfield, which was You know, he just didn't say a word.
He gave you a nod.
Gave me a nod, but it was like, yeah, it's a podcast. Sorry, everybody. It was a nod, but it wasn't a dismissive nod. It was like a
thank you. Yeah.
I hear you. You know, I get it. You're welcome. You know what I mean? It was like just so much more communicated in the nod than anything he could have said, really. Like it was like perfect, the nod, you know. Yeah. And then Kirk, as one might expect, James walks out and now it's just Kirk in the room. He comes over, puts his hand on my shoulder. He's like, hey man, so you hanging around for the show? You want to watch from the side of the stage? And this goes into, you know, speaking of no effing regrets, I try not to have any. If I were to put something in my regrets column, it would be Kirk Hammett saying to me, you sticking around for the show, and me going, no, I'm supposed to I have to be back in the office, because this was like in the afternoon. Right. I have a flight, you know, and he says, dude, why don't you tell your bosses that like we were being rock stars and we wouldn't let you do the interview till after, and then you can stay for the show. And me and whatever my Irish Catholic like work ethic. Yeah, I was just like, I can't do that. And I said no.
Are you crazy?
Stay for the show, and I went back to work. But but it's the blessing.
You could have had side stage Metallica access.
So dumb. We'd be best friends now.
You probably would have posted you up on the side. Do they do that occasionally? Like,
I mean, it's literally what he said. Yeah, he's like, you want to watch from the side of the stage? And I was like, yeah, I got to be back. Yeah, it was just so killer. He and I've gotten to interview him a number of times since, and he's been just as killer every time afterwards. But and I also put that in the blessing and curse category. And stop me if this is a story I've told you before too. But around that same time, I got to interview Billy Idol, who was Billy Idol and Adam Ant. When I was a young kid, like those were the first artists where I really loved music. Like before punk rock, before metal, like those were we're talking like elementary school, where it was just like, these are superhero, alien, you know.
Can I stop you for a second?
Please.
I love Adam Ant.
Really? Have we never talked about Adam Ant?
We've never talked about Adam Ant. Dude, Kings of the Wild Frontier is fucking one of my ultimate jams. Like I love that record. I had the B-side, I had the 45s, I had the single, like that. What they had a Stand and Deliver, and the backside was Beat Me. Like,
it's giving me goosebumps right now.
Fucking loved Adam Ant, dude.
Dude, my older brother and I had we used to take the little Lego minifigures and paint Adam Ant makeup and costumes on them. So we had our own little custom Prince Charming video. That's right. Stand and Deliver video, like all the different eras. Dude, I remember like Appointment TV, like waiting for when Adam Ant solo was going to be on Solid Gold.
Oh yeah,
like
oh jeez,
watching this Solid Gold episode, he's just lip syncing and
tissues or whatever.
Yeah, dude, that's so crazy. We've never talked about this because that was that Adam Ant was like the first number one, and it was also so cool for me with Adam Ant and Billy Idol to be able to, you know, because they were big pop stars at the time. This is like early to mid 80s as I'm discovering them, but they also both had that punk history
totally
to then reverse engineer and go back, you know, and Generation X, what's this?
And it was gnarly. Like it was like, I mean, it was heavy. I mean, to me, I think a song like You're So Physical off of Kings of the Wild Frontier is still just, it's fucking heavy. Like the feedback and the fucking super overdriven guitars and just, you know, like Nine Inch Nails covered it later on. And it was like, like totally. Of course you covered that song because it was awesome and heavy.
Yeah.
And I still think the Adam Ant version is heavier than the Nine Inch Nails version because it was so fucking the feedback and
all this stuff that was like taboo that he was dealing with that, you know, I didn't understand it then, and looking back at it now, it's like, dude, there's like S&M all throughout his stuff and like androgyny and like things we take for granted now, but at the time we're like, what?
Yeah.
And there was also and you'll probably remember this too, being such a super fan, that like when he was trying to act there for a minute. Like he was in an episode of The Equalizer.
Oh yeah, okay. I don't know if I.
Yeah, dude, it was like
jumped off the
circled in the TV guide, and yeah, dude, he was. He had like a couple of weird acting roles. What's funny is now he has a chip on his shoulder that Johnny Depp ripped off his look for Pirates of the Caribbean.
Kinda did a little bit, maybe. I don't know.
Have you ever seen him live?
I think Johnny Depp could have liked. He probably could have liked Adamant. I don't know.
Have you ever seen Adamant?
I never saw him live.
Me neither.
I was just super into it for a while. In fact, it was funny. I was trying to get my kids into Adamant. I got 2 teenagers, and this was probably about a year ago. I want to say this was even before the pandemic, or right before it. But I was just like, I had gone on a big Adamant kick again, and I was just listening to the record all the time. And I was like, I get in the car, they're like, "What is this? This is horrible." And I'm like, "It's not horrible. Listen." Like, this is good. Check it out. Beat me, will beat me for 10,000 years. They're like, "Dad," just like just rolling their eyes, and "Dad, no." And I'm just like, listen.
Yeah, I remember trying to get a buddy into Adamant once, and as soon as he heard he was like, "What? Turn that off." I'm like, no, give it a minute. You know who else randomly loves Adam and the Ants is Davey Havoc from AFI.
AFI, yeah.
That was one of the first things him and I ever bonded over in like the 90s.
Right.
There was something in some AFI song during an interview where I brought up some Adam and the Ants similarity. And I'm like, "Oh, this is probably random and crazy." And he was like, I live for those moments too. Like Homeboy from Emperor. I'm always afraid I'm going to mispronounce Isan.
Mm-hmm.
Another band that I loved around that time was Aha. And I started talking to him about Aha randomly on a podcast a few years ago. And only because he's Norwegian. And I was like,
are they Norwegian?
Yeah, I was like, and this is such a weird tangent. And it turned out he's like a super fan.
No shit, huh?
And about 2 years after I interviewed him,
they're the Take On Me band, right?
Yeah, there was their one U.S. hit. They're one-hit wonders in the U.S. and huge pop stars everywhere else.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
They had single after single all around the world, but never a second hit in America. They did a James Bond theme, but he released a solo cover of an Aha song like recently.
Oh, crazy!
But he told me when that came up, when I brought it up a couple years ago, that there's a melody lifted from Aha on the Anthems to the Welcome at Dusk album.
Get the fuck out of here. That's good. That's a good jack. That's a good place to steal right there.
Exactly. A good place to hide something too.
Yeah. I call it a jack when I jack something from somebody. I'm like, I just stole that shit right there.
I think Dave Peters came up with it, so I can't take credit for it, but Riff Lift. That's the one I use.
Riff Lift. That's good.
The Riff Lift. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some riff lifts are more egregious than others.
That's pretty random though. The dude from Emperor loving Aha.
Right.
Didn't see that coming.
Dude from Machine Head loving Adamant.
I know. I don't know why that's not so, like, because I like gothy shit, like the Cure. I've obviously professed my love for the Cure, so Adam and the Ant might not be that big of a step away.
That's true. Yeah, as Emperor to Aha.
Yeah.
Yeah, good, fair point. But yeah, and that was, so getting to interview Billy Idol, spent an entire afternoon with him at his practice space. Got to watch him rehearse with his band. Steve Stevens was with him. Because I know Steve Stevens isn't always part of it, but he was part of it then.
Mm-hmm.
Interviewed both of them. Got to tell them how, when I would see Idol Stevens in the credits, it's like, that's like Page and Plant for me. And, they were so cool. And the manager was there.
This is like the eyes without a face, like this era. Is that the era that you get into?
I love. I loved all of his records. The self-titled one, Rebel Yell, and the sleeper one to me is Whiplash Smile. That's probably my favorite record.
Okay,
that was a record after Rebel Yell, which started to kind of fall off a little in America. But I dig that record a lot. But yeah, so my point in bringing that up is the blessing and the curse is that it's a huge blessing and honor and amazing, and pinch yourself. We're packing up. We were at a rehearsal space in Burbank somewhere, and as we're packing up, I literally saw Billy Idol get on his motorcycle. And as he's pulling out of the parking lot, he sees me standing outside and gives me a fist. It's like, there it is, like what else do you want? But the whole reason I'm there is that year at the VMAs, Eminem and 50 Cent were nominated in a bunch of the same categories. This was the year that 50 Cent blew up.
Okay.
And so MTV News was doing like a fun piece that was pitting the two of them against each other. So they had like, who's scarier, Eminem or 50 Cent? And then Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger comes on and says, "Ooh, I think Eminem is scarier than 50 Cent." And somebody interviewed Robert Englund in full Freddy makeup for who knows how long to get that one little. And one of the questions was, who has better fashion sense? And then they had Carson Kressley from Queer Eye, which was big at the time.
Right.
Answer it. And I was there to ask Billy Idol, who's a bigger rebel, Eminem or 50 Cent? And that was it.
Okay.
That's all. That whole day with Billy Idol was just for that couple of seconds of garbage. Yeah. And to make matters worse, and this is somewhere that I can pat myself on the back a little bit, what they wanted, the reason why I was at his rehearsal, is what I had been tasked with, was they wanted him to play Rebel Yell and to stop mid-song and turn to our camera and say, Eminem's a bigger rebel than 50 Cent. Gotcha. And I just didn't ask. There was no fucking way I was asking. And when I got back to work, when I got back to work,
you're like, this is so corny. I can't ask this.
I can't. This is one of my heroes, childhood heroes. Yeah. And so I told the powers that be that he wouldn't do it, but the truth is I never asked.
Gotcha.
I just went back and was like, yeah, he wouldn't do it. And they're like,
and that's the only. So but you got to interview him?
Yeah, I mean, and it's great.
And that never got used.
But that's the thing is, and that speaks a lot, I guess, to the power of MTV at the time, is that artists would, because I don't think they would even now, but back then, like that they would subject themselves to that. It's funny, and this is super random, but another favorite artist of mine, House of Pain, is one of my favorite hip hop groups ever. And I interviewed Everlast once, and again, a very long interview and like a super fan interview for me. I know all the words to the first two House of Pain albums.
Pack it up, pack it in, let me begin.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, they got some good shit.
Yeah, they do. And he was the one artist in all those years that actually said to me mid-interview, he goes, and he said it good naturedly, and he didn't like get up and leave, but he goes, "You're not going to use all this." And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, this is going to show up in some like VH1 I Love the 80s or something, and you're gonna have just me making a comment about something that's got nothing to do with me.
Right.
And I was like, probably, but I do have an opportunity to write about this for the website. That was also back in the days when like being on the website was considered like third tier.
Right.
It'd be like,
D-list.
Yeah, this is just something. This is just something for the website, and that was a question you would get from publicists, like, well, is this for broadcast or is this for online? And it's like, now it's totally flipped, where people recognize like, well, you want to be digital.
Dude, you don't want to be on MTV now.
Yeah.
Like you want to be on the website, like,
or something,
no one's
that's
going to see it.
Yeah. Something that's, or if anyone does see it, they're going to see it once and it disappears forever.
I don't watch MTV anymore. I haven't watched MTV really in well over a decade at least, but
same. Yeah,
occasionally it'll go to commercial and it'll just be too many commercials, so I'll just flip over to it's like the MTV HD now or whatever it is.
Yeah,
I've never seen a music video on there, like fucking there's never music on there. It's just like random comedy thing, or the Carter Kid, or what. I'm just like, I don't care about any of this at all anymore.
Well, what's funny about Shelf Life?
I just heard they did an MTV award. I was like, they did an MTV award. I was like, what? They still do that?
Yeah.
Who's watching that?
And is there any prestige to that? Like, are you like MTV award winner?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm so like surprised.
It's gnarly. But speaking of things that have a longer shelf life in the long run, a buddy of mine digitized. You remember those Hard and Heavy videos?
Yes.
They were like VHS magazines.
Fuck yeah.
Buddy of mine digitized a bunch of them. And over the weekend, as I think I mentioned to you, I was fighting off my second vaccine fever. So I'm laid up with fever, and I'm just like, I'm going to watch one of those Hard and Heavy videos. Put one on completely at random, didn't even read the description. Guess who was in it? Violence.
Yeah.
Featuring a guy named Robb Flynn.
20-year-old Robb Flynn.
20-year-old Robb Flynn. Yeah, and it was so
not
funny.
Even old enough to drink.
Because we were texting like 2 hours before. And I'm just laying on my couch with like 102-degree fever. It was like Dio or something right before, and then all of a sudden you're on. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, that was a crazy show.
Serendipity.
They filmed that at Fender's. It was a fucking wild show. It was awesome.
Oh, the show looked crazy.
Rowdy as fuck, man. It was killer.
Yeah, and that series did a great job of blending music videos and original live footage with those interviews. And like the Dio segment that I watched was like MTV Cribs, but better because it was longer and not so like.
Is that the one where he was? I want to say I remember this, but it was like he was kind of in a wooden room, like a big wooden room, wooden table, and it looked like maybe swords or something was in the background. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, this house was built 8 years ago, but this table is from the Middle Ages. Like it was in this castle. Yeah. He has a full bar downstairs.
He spoke so well.
Oh, dude.
And I say that as a ignorant Oakland fuck. Like he spoke so goddamn good. Like it was, we toured with the Heaven and Hell, and every time I talked to him, I was like,
that's right.
Like, I need to step my game up.
He
never said, like there was never there was never a like, there was
him and Dickinson are like, there's a few of those cats where you're like, yeah, I want them to represent the rest of us.
Right.
It's like one of my favorite quotes I read in the magazine, and I wish I knew who said it. Read this when I was a kid, but it was in a review of Iron Maiden, and it said Iron Maiden is more likely to send kids running to the library than running with the devil. And that's always stuck with me because it's like, Flight of Icarus.
They sang about Satan too. They sang about the devil as well.
They did. That's true. But they were quite literate in a way that you wouldn't give.
Do you remember the thing that Bruce Dickinson did on MTV? I'm just asking you this because you worked at MTV. Maybe you remember this, but he had a character. He came out and he was Lord Iffy Boat Race. Do you remember that? He came out, he was like hosting it might have been a Headbangers Ball. I'm assuming it was a Headbangers Ball, but it was like a pretty long piece. He was like, played videos, and then he was in character for hosting this thing, and he had like, furry underwear and like all this stuff, and he was, I am Lord Iffy Boat Race. Like made no fucking sense at all, but like it was Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden. You had to watch it.
And dude, and that's an era of MTV when it was still experimental and exciting.
Irreverent. It was very irreverent.
Yeah, irreverent. Yeah, and the whole original idea of the award show was that they were deconstructing award shows. It was mocking the Grammys and the Oscars, and like it was intentionally ridiculous. And they, and then it became, rather than making fun of the establishment, it became the establishment.
Yeah.
And that's like what happens, I suppose, when things get more and more institutionalized. But yeah, something like that Dickinson thing is like when Weird Al used to do takeovers of MTV as Al TV, and they made it seem like he was like pirating, like cutting into their programming or whatever. And Freddy Krueger, there was a Freddy Krueger hour to promote one of the Elm Street movies.
Okay.
And it was like, remember that guy Kevin Seal? He was like one of the old VJs. It was like him and Freddy Krueger, like Robert Englund in character, and Vinnie Vincent was on it.
Oh, jeez. Vinnie Vincent. That major label money was paying off.
Dude, Vinnie Vincent Invasion did the song from Elm Street 4.
Did they?
Because
that wasn't Dawkins?
No, it was because the Dawkins thing was such a success with Elm Street 3.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That they went, well, let's do this again. We'll get a hair metal band to do a song.
Warriors.
Yeah, and the The Vinnie Vincent Invasion one just is.
No one cared.
It's no Dream Warriors.
Yeah.
In
all this pink is not working out.
Dude, in the video, there's a scene where Vinnie is in the Freddy sweater with the Freddy fedora.
Okay.
And he's got the glove on and he's got his flying V and he does like a
he does a
slide with the claw.
Now I want to pull that up.
Yeah, dude, it's great.
I wish I had someone who could pull that up and show that right.
Like the Joe Rogan moment where you're like,
yeah,
hey,
totally.
Yeah, I highly recommend. I'm like fascinated by Vinnie Vincent. That's like he's an amazing songwriter, but I have a weird fascination.
Come on now. We don't need to go amazing. Not amazing.
I mean,
he's good.
I love Kiss. I love Kiss, but is anyone in Kiss an amazing songwriter? I guess not.
There are some really good songwriters, people who have written great songs for Kiss that are amazing. Vinnie Vincent, no, you can't. There's a shelf there for amazing, and Vinnie is not on that shelf.
I mean, Creatures of the Night. Look it up.
There's some jams on that record. I love that record.
Yeah, I mean
that's the only Kiss record I like. Actually,
Creatures of the Night.
I hate Kiss, and that's the only record I like.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
that's a Vinnie Vincent album.
War Machine, Love It Loud.
Love It Loud is my favorite Kiss video.
What's the? Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
What's the? There's a fucking. Is it like I want to say Still Loving You? It's not Still Loving You. It's I Will Always Love You. I will still love you.
What is that song called?
I think it's I Still Love You. That's what it is.
Yeah, dude, that's like that record, it's such a weird record because it has Eric Carr and Ace and the makeup on the original album cover.
Yep.
But Ace isn't actually on the record.
Right.
Vinnie Vincent is.
Yes.
And then Ace is in the videos.
Oh, is he? Oh, shit.
And then they reissued the record in the 80s later with no makeup Kiss with Bruce Kulick in the photo, who's not anywhere to do with it. And then they ended up putting it back out again with makeup, but it's still with Ace. But really, that record should have a photo with Vinnie Vincent in it and with Vinnie Vincent in the Onk makeup.
Yeah.
But him and Gene Simmons wrote. I'm looking at it right now. Actually, they wrote "I Love It Loud." They wrote "I Still Love You."
I knew it was "I Still Love You." That's a jam right there.
Yeah, that's a Vinnie Vincent jam, my friend.
War Machine? Did they write War Machine?
War Machine is Gene Simmons and two randoms.
Okay.
When I say randoms, it's
only song that and I Was Made for Loving You. That's it. Everything else by Kiss sucks. I will fucking plant that flag and die on this mountain. Everything else by Kiss sucks. You heard it here.
Dude, Heaven's on Fire. No love for Heaven's on Fire.
No love for Heaven's on Fire. Zero. And don't even get me started on the early shit. I hate it. Fucking hate it. Never got it.
I love it.
Never, ever, ever got it. Were you a big Kiss fan? Is that your first, like one of your first bands?
I was and am a fan, but they're also, they fit in that category of like, it's more fascination than fandom, if that makes sense. Like, because I'm not rocking the music that often, but I'm endlessly fascinated by the behind the scenes drama and the shenanigans and the stories and Ace crashing Porsches, and I'm into all that side of it.
I'm into even Gene Simmons, who I don't like, I don't care about in any way. I just think that he's such a character. You guys can't pay attention to what he says just because like he's such a character.
I mean, the dude made one comment like 10 years ago that everyone still talks about in every interview. Gene Simmons said that rock is dead. I'm like, yeah, how long ago? Why do we care what he said?
I actually read a Gene Simmons interview one time. I've only read probably one or two because I don't care enough about Kiss to read them. But it was in Metal Hammer, and it was really cool because he like went off on a super deep dive about the Beatles and like all of the early Kiss influences, and it was like. It was rad to hear because all you hear about is money and all you hear about is rock is dead and like these kind of grand general statements that don't really mean anything but like get everybody to talk. And, to hear him like be a fan, like super fan, like he went went deep on the Beatles, went deep on old rock and roll, 50s rock and roll, 60s rock and roll. And I got to say that was far and away the best interview that I ever read about him, because it was like, okay, like at one point, and maybe he still is, but at one point this dude was like legit music fucking nerd, like freak, you know, like, and it showed, and it was cool to finally hear all that, you know. It probably didn't get picked up by any of the news aggregators because it was boring music,
not salacious enough. Yeah. Like this episode will be Robb Flynn hates Kiss. Yeah, it reminds me of Ozzy's reverence for Paul McCartney.
Right.
You know, whenever you see Ozzy talking about not just the Beatles, but Paul McCartney in particular, and you're like, yeah, he's Ozzy, but even Ozzy has his Ozzy. Yes, you know, like
totally.
That humanizes, I think, all of these. Yeah, like you're saying for Gene Simmons. You
have a super. You're also a dedicated hardcore fan of Metallica. You have a podcast, Speak and Destroy. I've been on your podcast. It's a fantastic podcast.
One of the early episodes, and still one of the most popular.
And super fun. It was a great, you know, it's just cool to just talk about Metallica and what it meant to us and all that stuff. And I've actually listened to so many of your podcasts because there have been a lot of great guests, and it's cool to just hear you talk. And it's kind of an endlessly fascinating topic in a way. And I don't even know why, because I've heard, the Metallica story, in my opinion, has been overtold at this point, and yet
canonized, if you will.
Yeah. Like, and yet I can still tune into your podcast from time to time, and like, just like, fuck, like I just get drawn into it, and it's rad.
I can still do the podcast, even when I hear some of the things coming up again, whether it's Load and Reload or Lulu or, you know, different things that people want to talk about that might feel tired. And yet each time there's something about it, even just being a different person that I'm talking with, making that same topic interesting to me again.
Right.
You know, hearing somebody else's perspective, especially as I'm, you know, as I get a little bit older and have people on the podcast where their experience is like Saint Anger was like the current record when they were in high school, you know, and that was like their entry point. They're like, yeah, I was really excited to go see Kid Rock, and Metallica was playing too. And then, and you're like, well, it's a valid experience for somebody else, even though it sounds insane to me, you know?
Right. Totally. Yeah. That's crazy to think that Saint Anger was somebody's starting point with Metallica, right? Like how we, I mean, it's 20 years old at this point. Like it is somebody's starting point. Some 15-year-old, 14-year-old, you know, it's absolutely crazy.
But yeah, and I, you know, it's, I don't know if it qualifies as a humble brag because, you know, but it was the first Metallica podcast in 2016. And there are now like 10 Metallica podcasts.
Oh shit, really? Nice. Yeah. You were the first though, huh?
Well, I was the first. And shout out to the other ones, you know, room for one, room for two, first rule of business. And it is an endlessly fascinating topic to where it can apparently sustain multiple podcasts. I like to think that mine has an edge because it's interview focused. And I like to think that I bring my journalistic integrity and experience to it as opposed to just, you know, whatever some of the other ones are. And I like to think that the other ones will carve out their own angle, you know.
There is an art to keeping the conversation going, and, you know, like you definitely have that.
Thank you.
Having interviewed so many people and having so much experience. I mean, you know, like you got to keep it going. I mean, especially I think with MTV where you really had to keep it fast and quick and tight, you know, now you can expand on that, but you still have that training. Okay, move it along.
move it along, keep it together.
Yeah.
And let it wander, but let it wander organically. And and I think, and again, having, you know, doing a little bit of media training for folks, one thing I often impress upon people on this side of the table, or I guess in this case, that side of the table right now, are follow-ups to where you don't want to be so rigidly adhering to whatever agenda you set out with ahead of time that you miss opportunities for cool shit that comes up naturally. Totally. You know, I mean, how many times have you been listening to an interview where the guest says some thread that you really wish got explored further, and the interviewer is just as, all they're thinking about is the next question.
Yeah. I never, do you ever write your questions down when you're doing these?
I don't anymore.
Yeah.
I used to.
Like for MTV or whatever.
Yeah. Even then, and not to knock anybody that does, because there's nothing wrong with it. But at the most these days, I'll do bullet points. Okay. If I hate to say if it's a big deal, because I like to think every conversation is of some weight and significance. But yeah, I might jot down some bullet points if there's things I want to make sure I don't forget. But I like to go into them conversationally. I mean, where I really sharpen the skill, and you've maybe heard me say this before, either to you or on a podcast, like, was doing movie junkets at MTV. Yeah. Because that was the bulk of what I did for a long time. Mm-hmm. And that's where they take the director and the cast and they put them in a room at the Four Seasons, and they fly in 100 journalists from all around the world for a weekend.
Yes, right.
And, the star of the movie is sitting in that same room Friday, Saturday, Sunday, with journalist after journalist coming in.
Yeah, it's a press tour.
4 minutes at a time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually asking the same 3 or 4 questions, which, in the old days, it made sense because a lot of those folks were local affiliates. So when you're in Indianapolis and you're watching, Wish TV Channel 8, which was like the local CBS affiliate or whatever, the local movie person's coming on in his suit or whatever, and he's like, yeah, Jim Carrey's new movie, The Mask, is coming out this weekend, and I had an opportunity to chat with Jim about it, and here's what he told me.
Right. And then
and you're sitting there and you're like, as far as that's that local dude's exclusive, right, hanging with his buddy Jim Carrey, but the reality of how it happened was, that guy was one of 50 people flown from all over the world to LA for a weekend to see the movie and then sit with Jim Carrey. And the other thing that was an issue there was that junketeers, as those people came to be called, they're not film critics. And here's a helpful hint when looking at reviews of movies: make sure they're reviews by film critics, because what a studio does when a movie sucks is they take quotes from press junkets and use them as pull quotes on the poster.
Okay.
So
it looks like a movie review.
Yeah.
But it's really just like a Facebook comment.
Yeah. It's actually somebody who was put up at the Four Seasons for 3 days, fed catering and given per diem, and taken in a shuttle to see the movie. Mm-hmm. And then someone said, hey, what'd you think of it? A funny story about that, kind of bringing us full circle, actually, is I was talking about my buddy Corey, who I shared an office with at MTV, and how my first week there, I covered a music story for him, which was Noel from Oasis. Well, me as the movie guy, he covered a movie junket for me once, and it was a movie called New York Minute, starring the Olsen twins. Corey, because I didn't tell him this, didn't know that our party line at the junkets was, when they would say, hey, can I get a reaction on the movie, was to say we don't give reactions. I just said that all the time. He didn't know that. And so when they were like, can we get a reaction on the movie? He was like, he said something ridiculous. Like, it's the feel-good comedy of the year, or it's the whatever. His quote was the huge, massive top poll quote in the full page newspaper ads for that Olsen twins movie. And on the back of the DVD, when the DVD came out, like huge, is like Corey Moss, MTV News. And it was like, the Olsen twins shine, or it's some like garbage movie. But that's how that happens, because obviously that film wasn't going to get a good review from a real film critic. So
did you ever interview any did you ever interview like a Ryan or a Robert Downey Jr. or anything like that?
I did a few times. The first time I interviewed him was for a movie called Gothica, that he was in with Halle Berry when his career was not as great as it would become again. Mm-hmm. And
he's way back out of rehab and kind of on the way back up.
Yeah, on the way back up. And it was a press junket, and it was a late evening one because they were doing some kind of film that was on night shoots. Because usually those are during the day, but this was like a nighttime one. And I walked in and I said, Ryan Downey, MTV, no relation. And he laughed, which was nice.
Yeah.
And then I said, before we start, I just want to thank you for a lifetime of Robert Downey Jr. jokes. And what I meant was the name. Like, just people were like, oh, Ryan Downey Jr. I didn't mean anything to do with his, like, you know, publicized issues.
Right,
but I realized as it came out of my mouth that it might come across that way. And he was just as awesome as he would want him to be. Just super dry. He just goes, imagine how I feel. He was so great.
He's fucking quick, man.
He's quick, and he's just and he's been sitting there answering the same 4 questions for 3 hours at that point, and he's still so quick. Yeah, he was great. And then I got to interview him a couple more times.
Like any of the Marvel stuff, like for some of the Marvel things.
At Comic-Con once, I think, for the first or second Iron Man, maybe.
Wow,
around that time, like
that's pretty rad.
Comic-Con press thing. You know, something that I've learned from that experience, by the way, when I get the like question from cousins in Indiana and stuff, you know, people always want to know if there's like bad stories or about people that are assholes or whatever. And my experience, I learned doing all those movie junkets, especially, the higher up the so-called food chain those people get, the nicer they are. And I the only theory that I really have is that they're more comfortable in their own skin and they have nothing to prove to me. Whereas the more sort of C-list, the more kind of up and comers, those are the people with the entourage. Those are the people with an attitude. And those are the people that need you to know when you come in the room that there's somebody. Whereas if I'm walking in the room with Ben Affleck or Julia Roberts or, you know, Quentin Tarantino, they don't need to convince me that they're important. Right. You know, they know, they know that I know. And so it's very chill, you know, and so it's kind of counterintuitive because you would think like the more A-list people might be, the more full of themselves. But in my experience, they're always the more down to earth. If anything, Ben Affleck comes to mind as somebody I've interviewed a bunch and really liked. If anything, they're on a mission to kind of show you that they are down to earth.
Right.
Because they know maybe you're coming in thinking that they think they're the shit. And so they want to make sure, you know, like, oh, cool, yeah. Oh, Metallica shirt, man. Cool. I like Metallica, you know, or whatever. Like they, you know, want to like relate to you and just be a human, you know? So that's been my experience. The only shitty experiences I ever had were with people that were like, you know, on reality shows or, you know, like they want to make sure, you know.
Did you have to interview any of the Jersey Shore people?
Never.
No.
Never had to. And I had very little overlap with that era, so that was nice.
That's good.
I did interview the Hilton sisters a couple times.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, they were nice.
Yeah.
It was kind of it was like just before they were a thing. It was when they were more like
you were just like
socialite
this is fucking hot.
Yeah, you know,
it's like this chick is hot.
I was always a Nikki Hilton fan when it came to the sisters.
She was the hotter one for you, huh?
Yeah, but you know, what can I say? I'm a Vinnie Vincent era Kiss fan, so I like my underdogs.
I can't even think of what Nikki Hilton looks like. I just kind of know what she's just so ubiquitous at this point that I got to go research her. I got to research her and Vinnie Vincent video.
Yeah, and you know, for a while it was the Hilton sisters before it became Paris Hilton.
Yeah, it
used to be the Hilton sisters.
I kind of remember this now. Yeah. Yeah, kind of an amazing life you've led, you know, coming from very...
It sounds like it when I talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Very humble beginnings in Indiana. And, you know, you come up and it's funny because I think about this as I was going into this interview. I don't want to say it's funny. That's just some thing that I say to transition. That's not necessarily the best segue word.
I know what you mean. It's also like when people say it's interesting, which is usually like underselling what you're about to say, but yeah, go on.
But you were my mom, but we were scheduled to do this a while back, and then my mom passed away. And
Yeah.
I wrote you and I just said, hey, I just need to I'm unplugging from everything right now for a minute. I just need to clear my head. I can't deal with this right now. And
I said, how dare you? Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Outrageous.
Imagine somebody.
Scheduled my podcast with God. I got anyway. But you said something, you said something you were just saying that, I lost my mom when I was really young, and it's never easy. And it was just, I think when you hear something like that in that moment, it kind of just makes it a little easier to process everything. It makes you know that you're not alone. And obviously, I think you said you were 12 when it happened or something, or 16 maybe.
11.
Jesus. Yeah. I mean, and it certainly puts it in perspective for me. Like, I'm, lucky enough that my mom lasted till she was 80. I'm 53. I can't even imagine what going through that at 11 would be. I'm able to process it and just kind of deal with it. And I've, had enough of these experiences in my life that I can take it. But, for someone like you, for anybody, that's horrible. What happened, if you don't mind talking about it?
No. Well, first of all, I'm glad that was offered some perspective or any kind of comfort, because it is one of those things where people want to say something and let their friends know they care about them. But it feels like whatever you might say is trite or cliche or whatever. But yeah, my mom suffered from lupus, which at the time in like the 70s and 80s, they still don't know a lot about it, but at the time they knew even less than they know now.
What's that?
It's sort of a mystery illness that affects your immune system. Okay. And it affects different people in different ways. In her case, it was roughest on her kidneys. So, by the time she was in her mid 30s, she had to have all of her teeth removed and she wore dentures. She was on home dialysis, which was a new thing at the time. I don't know if they still do it, but she had a tube inserted into her where she would basically do the work that your kidneys are supposed to be doing.
Yes.
Via this like IV bag. Yeah. And some of my elementary school age memories are of putting on a surgical mask and helping her with that stuff, and my older brother was a teenager at the time. So he was out smoking cigarettes and having a mohawk and being a teenage rebel. And, I was home with that stuff. And and I mean, not to make it sound like she was infirm, she was still very active and worked and lived a life, but had, this disease that was constantly sort of wearing her down. It makes you really tired. But eventually her kidneys failed to the point where the home dialysis didn't work anymore, and she would have to regularly go to like a dialysis clinic. I don't know how often, but it was pretty often. I went with her a few times where she goes and there's a row of people sitting in these recliners with like these machines doing the thing. And then, around Christmas time, one year she went into the hospital with a kidney infection. And I actually thought for years, and I didn't find out till I was an adult, and this was just, I guess no one really explaining it to me, but I always thought she died from lupus, but she actually died from an infection she got in the hospital from kidney failure, which was all ultimately related to lupus. So it's one of those, if somebody has HIV, but they die from pneumonia or, one of those things where technically she died from something else, but if she didn't have this autoimmune issue, she wouldn't have been in there in the first place, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But, as this conversation relates to art and music, I was actually doing a podcast interview, and this is one of the great things that's come out of podcasting, where with Miles Kennedy, who actually suggested this idea to me as we've been talking for a book, which is now in my, infinite to-do list of ideas and plans, but to do a book about different musicians who lost a parent at a young age and how that shaped the art that they made eventually and who they are as a person and how they relate to the world. And, Hetfield having lost a parent, I think is no coincidence to my emotional connection, I think, to that band.
Right.
Lyrics and things like that. The role, positive and negative, that religion plays in a lot of that stuff. Particularly for, Hetfield and Miles Kennedy don't know each other, but they were both raised in Christian Scientist families.
Oh, crazy.
Which are you don't go to the doctor. You don't go to health class.
Yeah, you get cancer. Yeah, I know. You can't go to health class.
Yeah, you have to go stand out in the hallway.
Cancer, and you just deal with it.
Yeah. And Miles Kennedy, when he was about the same age I was when my mom passed, if I remember correctly, his dad died from appendicitis.
Oh,
it was just had appendicitis, which is a
very
treatable.
I
had my appendix out 20 years ago.
Same
It's
here.
a very common thing.
I was 11 or something.
And he just wouldn't go. He just didn't believe that you go. So he stayed home in bed and died from appendicitis.
Jesus.
And and there's as you unpack these stories of a lot
That's
of
crazy. I was
artists.
just talking with my producer Brian McKay about Miles Kennedy.
Oh, really?
The guy who's recording this right now, and just randomly that comes up again. It's crazy.
And dude, and I think that guy's like our Jeff Buckley. I wasn't familiar with Alderbridge, admittedly, and then I got his publicist is a friend of mine. His publicist gave me that first solo record, and I really, really dug it. And I was having him, obviously way pre-pandemic, the Q&A series that I do at the Musicians Institute. I had him as a guest there, and he performed actually, and did the Q&A with him and stuff. And then I ended up having him on a podcast independently of that, where we talked about all this stuff, like the really, really heavy stuff. And and he actually suggested, because him and I started talking about how different musicians and things. I think Madonna might be one of them. Bono, maybe. I might just be making up huge artists right now, but there's no shortage actually when you start kind of digging into it of
how does an 11-year-old Ryan Downey cope with that?
I'll tell you, I'm comfortable talking about this with you only because you as an artist have been so open about your stuff, your issues over the years. That's the only thing to me that makes it not weird. I found out I was never married, but I was in a relationship with my kid's mom for, 11 years. It was basically like a marriage. And when that relationship ended, which is obviously a big life-changing event, I went to talk therapy for the first time right around that same time. And one of the questions that came up there was, I was like, my ex thinks that I'm like a robot, that I don't feel anything, and that I'm, happiness, sadness, that I sort of fake my way convincingly enough through those, but that I'm actually like this, blank slate. And I'm saying to this therapist, is that true? Am I Dexter? Is that and he said, it was a really turning the corner moment for me. He said, no, in fact, you have a raging sea of emotions buried inside of you. He's like, the problem is at a critical age in your development, where you're around the age where you learn how to access and process and deal with your emotions, you were robbed of your entire foundation. So as a defense mechanism, you just flipped an off switch and put all that stuff, in a box where, you were robbed of this whole time in your life where you learn how to deal with all that, with things, and, and that was really profound. And that was, my mom passing away and my kids being born, those are like the most important moments in life.
These are pretty far apart though, right?
Yes, very far apart. And that was the greatest gift of my daughter, and later my son being born was like two things in life that finally surpassed that initial moment,
right.
Because I would realize sort of over time how much we can allow tragedy to define us. And I saw myself as somebody that was like, I had this tragic, tragic upbringing, and would sort of weaponize it, which, ultimately attracts us to like punk rock and metal and hardcore and these aggressive ways of like,
you had
fighting back against the world.
Father was alcoholic, checked out for a long time. I mean,
yep.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. My parents divorced when I was 4 because my dad had drank and gambled his way out of the family. And I didn't see him again until I was 11. And he shows back up in Alcoholics Anonymous, getting his shit together, becoming like weekend dad, taking my brother and I to the movies once in a while.
This is after your mom passes away?
Right before.
Oh, right before. Gotcha. Jeez.
It was like, he was like a stranger to me,
You're right.
I hadn't seen him in years. And,
you're probably not going to remember much.
No.
4.
And my brother's 5 years older than me, so he still had a lot of memories of our dad. And when he showed back up, my brother's like, "Yeah, my dad's back, cool." And I was like, "Who's this guy?" And I had been really close with our mom, it was very unstable, I guess is a way to put it. And all credit in the world to my dad, because he definitely stepped up and did his best. And
that's cool.
He's 81 years old now, and he's been sober since like 1986 or something. And he speaks on recovery panels and he's got multiple recovering addicts and alcoholics under his wing. He's still like super involved in that whole community and everything, which I think has also given me, in this thing of ours, a great deal of empathy, because sometimes you grow up with that kind of story and you throw yourself, and this is where I think the OCD thing comes in too. You can throw yourself 100% into being as wasted as possible all the time, or you can throw yourself 100% into being militant straight edge.
Yes.
Like I was.
You did the latter.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so much sides of the same coin, right? Like is worlds apart as they can seem. What they have in common is an extremity in like willing yourself and willing the world to be something other than what it is. Right. And it's like being so like, drugs and alcohol are the cancer destroying society, and I am a warrior against it, is just as much about like trying to control things as trying to,
as my view, I'm going to drink I'm going to drink till I'm blacking out. I'm going to do every drug under the sun and fuck everybody.
Yeah. And everything that's bothering me, I will forget about.
Straight edge.
Yeah, exactly.
Just be like that.
Exactly. So yeah, but I think it's given me a lot of empathy, my dad's whole experience and everything too, because, as a journalist in the rock and metal world, especially, I am in conversation with people in recovery all the time.
Right.
And I start kicking the lingo to them, and they're like, "Are you in recovery?" And I'm like, "No, but I'm like an Al-Anon kid." And they're like, "Oh, okay." Like they immediately know, like, and again, it's a comfort level, right? Like there's a trust there for people that have been through that stuff,
Yeah. You got really drawn to the vegan straight edge hardcore. I mean, you started off with metal, you Megadeth and stuff like that, but then
Absolutely.
Sounds like
Megadeth was the band that got me into metal. Peace Sells was my first metal record.
That's a good starting point.
It was, I went right from Billy Idol, Adam and the Ants, Susie and the Banshees, the Smiths, the Cure, all that stuff, which made you very weird in Indiana in the 80s.
Weird in California.
Right. Right. Exactly. And it made you friends with like 4 other people that were weird like you were. And a lot of times weird in different ways. Right. It's like, we're not even into the same stuff. We're all just into stuff nobody else is into. So we're together. The Young Ones played a huge part. The Young Ones was the first time I heard Motorhead.
I read something. Yeah, I read your Young Ones vlog. That was awesome.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Introducing my kids to the Young Ones over the last few months has been like one of the great joys. Seeing them kind of get the humor and laughing at it, because it really shaped my humor too. But it exposed me to like Madness and a lot of groups that were on there. And then Peace Sells was pretty awesome because I had a friend who was into hair metal, which I wasn't into at all. And I was like in 7th grade. He bought Peace Sells on cassette because he mistakenly thought that it was going to be a hair metal band. Because this was also when you're like buying stuff without hearing it.
Well, they kind of look like, and Megadeth kind of look like hair metal in
the band photo.
They got the lip gloss. It's kind of teased up. Like they were dipping their toe in the glam.
That was the closest they ever got, was right around that era.
Yeah,
sure. So if you were looking through Rip magazine and you saw those dudes, in that era, like, you could be forgiven for making that mistake. But he made that mistake, put it in. Thought it was unlistenable, insane nonsense, and gave it to me like as a lark of like, dude, you got to listen to this. This isn't even music, and gave it to me to get rid of it. And it was like a scene from a movie, putting that in the tape deck and it coming on and just like, changing my world in like a matter of seconds, like just immediately in love, immediately fascinated, intrigued, enthralled. And by happenstance, I used to hang out at the local newsstand and read magazines about like, Star Trek and all the nerdy stuff I was into. Fangoria, Starlog. I used to just hang out there and
loved all that shit.
Befriended the guy who ran the newsstand and would let me and my friends hang around without buying stuff. And happened in there right around the time I got the Peace Sells tape, and there was a magazine called Cream Presents Thrash Metal, issue number 1, and it had Dave Mustaine on the cover.
Oh, okay.
And I went, that's that guy from that band. And so I bought it solely for that reason. And in that magazine was an article called The 20 Greatest Thrash Metal Albums of All Time. And what's hilarious about this is that this was 1987.
Right.
So it's one thing to write that article now. Yeah. Right. But on that list was like Creator, Terrible Certainty, Rain and Blood, Kill 'Em All. I think Rain and Blood was number 1. Hell Awaits was on
this there. This is like your okay, now I need to go down this rabbit hole.
Yes. Yeah. And that OCD thing of like, now I'm in it. I'm saving my lunch money. I'm not going to eat lunch at school, so I can take all my lunch money and go to the record store every Friday and buy whatever's on this list that I
whatever cassette is out.
Cassettes. All cassettes.
Yeah, all cassettes, right? No vinyl. Yeah.
Yeah, and one time I figured out that I could buy 2 EPs for the price of a record of one, and that's how I ended up with Overkill, Fuck You, and Celtic Frost, Tragic Serenades.
I was just going to say Celtic Frost because there wasn't a whole lot of bands putting out EP. You could get Haunted the Chapel and Celtic Frost, Circle of the Tyrants.
I was so pumped because I'd never heard Celtic Frost. That was my first exposure to Celtic Frost, and it was literally just because it was an EP and I could get 2 instead of 1. But yeah, so that and what's a crazy kind of full circle moment there is that the guy who wrote that list of the 20 greatest thrash albums of all time was a writer named Don Kay.
Oh shit, Don Kay.
Years later, working at MTV covering movie junkets, that's what he does now.
Right.
I don't think he's written about music in forever, but he's
the last thing he wrote about was he gave my debut album 5 out of 5 Kerrang! In Kerrang! Don Kay.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. that probably was the last time he was writing.
I think he reviewed The Blackening as well, and that might have been one of his last things that he did.
Yeah, but yeah, so it was so crazy meeting him in this whole other world, in this whole other life.
Yeah.
And then one day going like, yeah, shout out Don K, and one day at a movie junket, going up to him and being like,
dude,
you're not the same Don K by any chance. And for him too, it was like, you know, like a visitor from the past or something, like time traveler.
So this quickly morphs into you. So you want to join a band after all this at this point.
I will bring up Dave Peters one more time to say,
do you start playing guitar? Do you start playing an instrument? Or are you just like, I'm going to be a singer?
Well, I'll bring up Dave Peters again to say his favorite quote of mine, which I quote all the time: never trust anyone in the music business who didn't try to start a band first. With apologies to a couple of exceptions who may be out there, I found that to be true.
A lot of people, most of the music business people I know.
I mean, it seems like that's the first instinct of the people we can relate to. Yeah, I actually.
Was Dave Peters with you back then? Was he?
No. We didn't know each other then.
Right.
Because he grew up out here.
Yeah.
But and he's younger than we are. But yeah, I lucked out actually that. So I was, you know, riding a skateboard and wearing a denim vest with patches all over it and full on thrash metal dude, mullet, everything, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade.
Yes.
And getting into high school is then when I met other thrashers, because there were like one or two hair metal dudes that crossed over a little into stuff I liked in middle school.
Right.
But when I got to high school, there was like 8 or 9 other dudes who were sophomores and juniors who were full on, you know, bullet belts and everything you imagine as late 80s thrash dudes, you know. And tours came through. Like we had stuff that you wouldn't necessarily associate with a market like Indy. You know, I saw Sacred Reich and Atrophy, and you know, there wasn't a lot of people there, but it came.
Yeah.
You know,
you're near Indianapolis.
In Indianapolis.
Okay, in India. Good.
Yeah. So
that's the major city.
Yeah, we had, you know, good thrash shows at the time, but yeah. So it was through that, meeting people in high school. My buddy Matt Reese, who's still somebody I talk or text with on a daily basis, works for the Forest Service in Alaska. He's a government employee, a scientist. But he was the first dude who said, my friends and I have a band. We're looking for a singer. And not having ever been in a band before, of course, I was just like, that's me. I'll do that. And God bless my older brother.
You're so confident.
It's to fake it till you make it, because I had no right to think that I could do that. My older brother, it really helped me a lot, because they gave me a list of songs to learn for practice. Mm-hmm. And it was Am I Evil, Sanitarium.
Oh, Metallica, all Metallica.
Death Angel, I'm Bored. For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Were you singing a lot as a kid? Like, were you like singing along to albums and singing along to the radio?
Not at all. I had and it was one of those, like, I can't do anything else in a band because I don't play an instrument. But my brother gave me the best advice, which was, I'm sitting there with the tape deck, listening to these songs, learning them and writing down stuff in the notebook and trying to make sure I have it all memorized. And my brother comes by and here's what I'm doing. And I explain it to him, and he goes, let me just tell you something. When you go over there, they're not going to sound like this. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, your little buddies aren't going to sound as good as what you're listening to right now. So don't be all worried about how you're going to sound, because it's not going to sound like that. And that had not occurred to me until he said it. In my mind, you know, it was like, ooh, joining somebody's band, I'm going to like show up. Yeah, it's going to at least be like Cliff 'em All or something, you know. And no, it certainly was not. The drummer had a huge Tama kit. He was like one of the kids who, like, you know, had like a rich family, and so he had like a whole room where we could have band practice that wasn't even his bedroom, just like another room in the house, which blew my mind all by itself. And he had this huge Tomic Hit double bass that like took up half the room, sits down and just is horrible. Like just like, just like pretty much by most definitions could not play drums.
Yeah. And then, you know what? I think when you learn to play with somebody like that too, it just makes you better. Like, you know, like
right?
That's the fun of being in a band, is just like you get together and you suck for a while.
Yes.
Like way longer than people think. You know?
Yeah.
You just suck for a while. And then at some point, like you just start getting good.
Yeah. And like the bass player sucked. The singer sucked. Me. The drummer sucked. And the guitar player was like kind of good. Yeah. And so it was sort of like him just dragging the other three of us
totally. It like
forward for like a couple months. Yeah. You know, yeah, like kind of by association. Like, yeah, you play with somebody who's like a little bit good.
When you're singing for the first time, are you now like all this shit that you've been dealing with, your mom passing away, your dad, you know, coming back into your life, former alcoholic after being gone, all of this kind of chaos that you've been through, are you just venting it all out now?
It's yes and no, because I think it was not consciously, like you're not aware that that's what's happening, but that's what's happening for sure. You know, it gives you a place to plant all of that angst and resentment and questions. And I found myself also pretty quickly drawn into the more sort of, I don't want to say esoteric, because I also don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to sound sophisticated, but you know, the metal bands and the songs and the personalities who talked about bigger things, you know, philosophically or politically or whatever. And, you know, being like, and this is no disrespect to the mighty Dave Mustaine in 2021, but being 15 years old and reading an interview with somebody like Mustaine, I was like, this guy should be president, you know, or you're just like Phil Rind from Sacred Reich. That guy's a genius, you know, like these are like people where I'm like, you know, these are like our poet laureates.
You're saying to legalize weed, man. This is fucking awesome.
Yeah. This guy has a song about school administrations and how they're oppressive, you know, like that's right, man. It's like, what has he been to Southport High School? How does he know?
So you didn't latch on to the more satanic aspect of metal.
I didn't. Yeah. I always saw that as sort of theater, you know, like, and maybe it's because I read interviews with Venom, because Venom, at least early on, was very much like, yeah, we're not serious.
Yeah.
You know, so I saw it as more cartoony B-movie horror stuff, which I liked.
Mm-hmm.
But it really wasn't until the black metal bands, which came along obviously a lot later, that I ever really got a sense that anybody meant it. Gotcha. And then that had its own cool to it, because then it's like, well, this is kind of powerful because this dude burned a church. Yeah. You know, like he means it, I guess. And then that's a whole different thing. But yeah, no, I never really.
You quickly go into hardcore though. Like, don't you, like, you don't front a metal band at any point, do you? Like you?
No,
hardcore.
No, our band was originally called Outcast, which was probably the name of 1,000 other bands. There was no internet to tell us otherwise.
Right.
And then when we discovered DRI, COC, DOA, we realized that a 3-letter acronym name was the way to go. So we became RFU, which stood for Rejected Fuck Ups.
Yes.
And we recorded a demo, which was just us playing it at practice, recorded on a boombox.
Yes. That's the way to do it, man.
I don't think you could say ghetto blaster
anymore. That's all you did back then. Boombox. And Matt Reese, our bass player, his late father, worked for Xerox, like the company Xerox. Oh, okay.
And so we could go to the Xerox corporate office in Indy on the weekends.
Oh, you bastards! And get
stickers and zines, dude. We did our fanzine, we did the demo covers, we did flyers, we did everything all throughout high school. We did.
That's amazing.
There for free.
I used to spend hours and hours at my copy center, just spending fucking fuck tons of money doing that.
So much time.
What a luxury to have.
And then people figured out how to like steal the Kinko's cards and stuff. Yeah, it was wild. But so that became, so RFU was the first real band, but never actually made it to a show. And then hardcore came about in a very similar way to metal, where I had a friend who was like a Liberty Spikes, leather jacket, Sid Vicious padlock around his neck punk rock kid, a guy named Alex Givens who passed away actually a few years ago. And Alex was another person who bought something thinking it was punk and was like, what is this nonsense? And gave it to me just to get rid of it. And it was the Revelation Records New York City Hardcore The Way It Is compilation. And it had Sick of It All. I think it had Gorilla Biscuits, Youth of Today, Warzone, Youth Defense League, all these, New York hardcore bands.
That's some good New York hardcore right there.
And it was
late
really
80s.
good.
Post Cro-Mags, post Agnostic Front.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Right in that sweet spot, right in between. And yeah, same thing. He thought it was a punk record, bought it not knowing what it sounded like, on tape. Gave me the cassette, and it was a similar thing where this time, instead of Thrash Metal Magazine and the liner notes to all those tapes, now I had the liner notes to the comp. I had all these bands, because it was a bunch of bands on one record. And that was the first time I bought Maximum Rock and Roll from your stomping grounds.
Yeah.
Our local record store.
I was never a big Maximum Rock and Roll fan. This
was the brief but pivotal moment for Maximum Rock and Roll, because I bought it, and the issue
cover hardcore.
And they had, this was my first byline, because they had local scene reports.
Okay. And
I sent them an Indianapolis scene report.
Oh shit.
And that was the first time my name was ever in a magazine.
Wow.
It was like a big deal to me. Yeah. And of course I wrote about my own band in the scene report, because of course that's what you did. But yeah, and that became, and that was, another thing where just discovery and the first Maximum Rock and Roll that I bought had Bad Religion's Suffer album cover on the cover. And that's how I found Bad Religion. And, it's like years later, like managing a band on Epitaph and getting to know Brett, and at some point busting out the like first issue of MRR I bought, Suffer on the, like getting to drop in those fanboy moments is pretty fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then that was, I say MRR was pivotal because, and this is so funny because it sounds so hilarious post-internet, but there was a classified section in MRR.
Yep.
And it was in the classified section where my buddy Matt and I, as we were metal heads getting into hardcore, didn't know a single hardcore person. Nobody who knew anything about any of that music. Just, there wasn't even a scene that existed that we knew of. There was a kid on the north side of Indianapolis, which is about a 30-minute drive. But when you're 15 and it's the late 80s,
right,
might as well be
Iowa.
Yeah, California. There was a kid in the classified section who was literally just like, I'm a hardcore kid into these bands or whatever, looking for anybody else in Indianapolis who's into this stuff too. Wrote him a letter, snail mail.
Yes.
Ended up exchanging phone numbers. And then that dude, it's funny, both of the dudes I'm talking about right now, we're in a group chat together that goes every day. Still, those two dudes are my two oldest friends that I'm still in like regular contact with. But yeah, this dude Curtis, who ended up in a band called Split Lip, that was later a band called Chamberlain, who were the Gaslight Anthem took them out on their reunion tour, and Dashboard Confessional covered one of their songs. Like all those emo bands that came later, they were one of the bands that was like crucial to them or whatever. And they were from Indy. We had our couple of, we had Sloppy Seconds and the Zero Boys and some like punk bands that were like, had like a little bit of reach outside of Indy. But yeah, all of which is a long-winded way of saying that eventually my friends and I started what we didn't know at the time, but what turned out to be the first straight edge hardcore band from Indianapolis ever.
Nice.
A band called Clear Sight, which later changed its name to Hardball, and managed to release not only a demo but a 7-inch.
Nice.
And that was
were you like militant, like you're running around with a hockey puck or a hockey stick knocking beers out of people's hands straight edge?
No knocking of beers out of people's hands, but our
the
bass
band
player
Slapshot, the band Slapshot used to do that.
But our bass player did carry a hockey stick.
Okay.
Because he was a hockey player. And after we changed the name of the band to Hardball, I did carry a baseball bat on stage.
Oh shit.
And I was like,
motherfuckers are getting smashed if you
I was like
drink
130 pounds too. So here's what happened though.
Did you get violent in this time? Was this like now you're like starting to
stop me at any point when this story is boring, but
fights a lot now.
Here's what happened. Honestly, we did one show as Clear Sight, and we thought Straight Edge was all positive, 7 seconds, minor threat.
Oh, right.
We're punk, we're having fun.
I read this, and then everybody hates you. Right?
All about unity, and then everybody hates us. And all of our old friends that we were friends with from the metal scene came to our one and only show, which was in a community center we rented that was next to a police station. Came to our one and only show, littered it with liquor bottles and beer cans on purpose, like they were trying to get us in trouble. We were putting up stickers around our high school, and they would like deface them. We put up flyers, and they would like write shit on it, and it was all like they were so anti Straight Edge, and we were just like, oh, positive unity. Right. And that was the experience that turned us all militant. Gotcha. Was getting so much shit from all those people. And then the other thing that was significant for us, also through MRR, is we found out about a band in Cleveland called Die Hard, who later became the band Integrity.
Oh, okay.
And Dwid, who was the original singer in Die Hard and was and is now the singer for Integrity, he's like 2 or 3 years older than me, but again, at the time seemed like a wise elder. Dwid and I became friends, and he actually moved to Indy for a short time.
Oh, crazy.
And that was another like really, getting to know Dwid when I was 15 was like a earth-shaking, world-moving moment for me, because he was into hardcore and metal. And we had this thing as we got into the wider hardcore scene, like metal was very taboo at that time. And everyone in hardcore had like a crew cut and like a Champion jersey and camo shorts. And if you were a metal dude, you were a redneck or white trash, or, we got looked down upon. We found as we went out and started playing shows in like St. Louis and Louisville and Detroit and getting involved in like the wider hardcore network. Perfect case in point is we played a show in a place called Club Blitz, which was Tony Victory's basement in Chicago. This was back when Victory Records had 3 7-inches out, and Tony was still in a band called Even Score. And we rolled up with our 19-year-old drummer, and we were, I don't want to put, I don't want to exaggerate it or make it too silly, but us and our friend, the other whole part of like people we went to high school with, like we were, I don't know how else to put it, because it sounds funny, especially talking to somebody who grew up in California, because I'm still talking about Indiana. But we were around a lot of gang culture, and we hung out with, and some of us were in local gangs that were.
The hardcore back then was all about crews and gangs.
It was.
Everybody was in a crew. Every band had a crew.
And in the late 90s,
every city had a crew that went to the hardcore show.
And in the late 80s and the early 90s, as much as we associate the Bloods and Crips and Latin Kings and all those street gangs with the West Coast, one thing people overlook about that history is that members of those gangs migrated to the Midwest around the late 80s and the early 90s and started offshoots and sort of like associate, the way like biker gangs work, where it's like, this crew's not the Hells Angels or the Outlaws, but they're aligned with the Hells Angels or the Outlaws, right. And that's how all these gang, we had red and blue gang colors, different gangs that weren't the Bloods and Crips, but were like, it was all dumb and stupid and silly. But my point in bringing that up is that we went up to Chicago in Club Blitz with our, at this time, our like
Your crew.
Yeah, and our shirts like buttoned at the top, like opened, and blue do-rags, but still with like our metal mullets, and Tony Victory and his friends were all like, they had varsity jackets that said Chicago Straight Edge on them. They were like fancy, and they all were like super clean cut, and like, they looked like a church youth group, and we just looked like, we all looked like we should be like Mike Muir's backup band. And we're in like, our bass player's mom's station wagon with all of our gear like loaded up in the back. And I just remember that as like a real moment of like, man, we're still like, we just don't, outcasts among the outcasts, like we still just don't fit into even this thing that we like. We're still, and meeting Dwid and kind of developing parallel with Integrity at the time, he was a white trash dirtbag who came from metal, and he loved like Christian Death and Sisters of Mercy, and he turned me on to Sam Hain, and that was like one of those kinship moments of like, oh, like I'm all these things that I think are incongruent and that make me a weirdo, even amongst other weirdos. Like there is a way to like synthesize all this and just like be who I am. And it's okay to love, Forbidden and also love the Cro-Mags, and also love Susie and the Banshees, and also love Billy Idol. And, it was like, okay. And he was one of the first people that, I really got that from, and I really looked up to him, and we really became kind of like a little Integrity clone. And that band split up a year or two after I was out of high school, but we managed to put out a 7-inch, which was like, it was like 1991. So, it was, it was like, that's it, right?
You're
like,
the
you're
king.
done.
You've
accomplished everything. Yeah. And,
you know what I don't want to cut you off here, but
no.
You know what I never hear you talk about anywhere in podcasts? So I don't know, for me, like the second that I couldn't get pussy to save my life, like prior to being in a band, like chicks just like, I ended up like Chris Rock says, like I ended up in the friend zone. Like I ended up in the friend zone 24/7. And then like for some reason I get in a band, nothing about me is different. I've been playing guitar and like all these things happen. And like now chicks are like, hey, I want to fuck you. And I'm just like, yeah, that's awesome. Like you're the singer now. I became the guitar player first. I was just the guitar player in my band, and chicks were one. Now you're the singer. You got a 7-inch out. You're a big star in Indianapolis. Like, is this when like is there hardcore vegan straight edge groupies? Is there, like, I know like in the skinhead scene, it was like I can't remember what the name is right now.
Skinbirds.
Yes.
Yeah. It's okay. So there were, somewhere in here, as you probably guessed, there was an anti-racist skinhead phase. It's funny because, a crucial part of that story of the turning from happy-go-lucky straight edge to militant straight edge. So the guitar player in that first band, the one who was better than all of us, his girlfriend, who went to a different high school, and I only met at metal shows when we would all go to metal shows, and she was a metal chick. God, this story is so funny and hilarious and embarrassing. And this is like, we're literally like 14. It does involve that my first kiss was at a Gwar concert, which is
that's
fun
good.
fact about my life.
That's good. That's a good place for a first kiss.
Howard Johnson's ballroom when Gwar was touring their first album.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like probably less than 100 people. So the guitar player in that band.
His girlfriend gives you your first kiss?
Yes.
Okay.
Long story short.
Okay.
What had happened was when I discovered straight edge, and me and a couple of my friends were getting all into it. and the guitar player in that band at the time, the like crossover band, was thinking about getting into it too. He was like, yeah, I've been trying to talk my girlfriend into this whole straight edge thing. And you're just, you're more well-spoken than I am. And you have this like more sort of persuasive, like, could you call her and just like explain it to her? Gives me his girlfriend's number. And that, my friend, was the beginning of a love triangle.
Oh my gosh.
That destroyed our group of friends.
Oh no.
And actually created, that had a large part to play in the fracturing of our whole friend group, where he ended up joining a band called Radiation Sickness.
This is the guitar player that's better than everybody.
Yeah.
And his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And he gives you the number to talk her into becoming straight edge, and then
that leads to her and I
having a relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
like your first
sex? I believe that
your first sex?
No.
Okay.
But first everything else.
Yeah. Blowjob.
Yes.
Kiss.
Everything
not sex.
Man, we're podcasting.
At 14. At 14 too, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
you go in Indianapolis.
And by the way, her and him are currently married.
Oh, geez.
With like 5 kids.
Yeah. So
we're all friendly.
They stayed together.
They ended up back together. Yeah. But back when this was
does he find out that she gives you a blowjob? Okay.
Oh yeah. And I'm under the impression.
And it's okay.
Well, I'm under the impression that they're broken up and he's harassing her.
Okay.
And he's under the impression that they've never been broken up and I'm harassing her.
Oh, gee.
And this was her part in the whole thing.
Right.
Was she very much had each of us under the impression that we were the authentic boyfriend, and the other dude was the like dude interfering.
How old is she at this
same
point?
Same age.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so, yeah, him and I had a fist fight. At one point.
Nice.
And he joins this band called Radiation Sickness, and they write a song about me.
Oh shit! A diss track.
Diss track.
A Ryan Downey diss track.
Yep, it's called Disfigured Retard. And it was in
NPC. Totally NPC.
Oh, it's about to get less PC here in a moment, my friend. I don't want to get any of us canceled here, but there was a fanzine at the time.
Disfigured Retard.
There was a fanzine at the time that we read about in Maximum Rock and Roll because they would advertise it in there called Homocore, and it was for the queer punk scene.
Okay.
So not me, but one of the guys in my so our band Clear Sight becomes Hardball. The first song that we ever wrote as Hardball was a song called A Sickness in Southport, they were called Radiation Sickness. We all lived in a part of Indy called Southport.
Okay.
Sickness in Southport.
Now you read a diss track.
I wrote an answer back. You know the hip hop lingo.
A clap back.
I wrote a classic clap back to Disfigured Retard called A Sickness in Southport. And
what is it about? I got a blowjob from your girlfriend.
I wish that if I had it to write again, that's what it would be. But it wasn't that fun. It was more just I was going to beat them up.
Gotcha.
And we did 3 of us actually did go to one of their shows with the sole purpose of disrupting it, which we did.
Wow.
A huge brawl broke out from which the 3 of us managed to escape unscathed, only to find out the next day that 2 of our friends who got left behind were beaten savagely.
Oh, geez.
2 people weren't even in our band who were just friends with us.
Nothing to do with you guys.
Yeah, and we'd left, and we're like, yeah, we did it, not knowing the carnage that's unfolding.
I would guess at this point the love triangle has ended.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, so we had the rival bands, which created rival scenes and factions, and that became straight edge versus because they
partied.
They partied, and that's where a lot of the militancy came from. Is actually arose from this love triangle where everything was cool.
So now you've got your first taste of sex. You're a
Oh wait, I did tell you the homocore thing. So there was a zine called Homocore, which was for queer punk rockers, and we read about it in MRR, and obviously very progressive for the late 80s. This was a thing that was happening.
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
So one of the guys in my band, Hardball, wrote a letter to Homocore as this ex-friend of ours from Radiation Sickness.
Yeah, gotcha.
In character. And he's like, dear Homocore fanzines, so-and-so from Radiation Sickness. We're a homo punk band in Indianapolis. And recently I've developed a lot of feelings for our drummer named so-and-so.
Oh,
I was hoping you could give me some advice. Wrote this whole letter, which that zine then published the letter and like answered the letter. They took it totally seriously.
Right.
And sent issues of the zine to all of their houses because we included all of their mailing addresses.
Oh my God.
So that was the
that was the super disc. That was
the biggest of all the
clap back.
And it's funny because obviously years later we were all like friendly with each other and laughing about all the shenanigans, and everyone grows up and has a family and a job.
Was it a good blowjob? Did you enjoy your first blowjob?
Since you asked, yes, I did.
Awesome. What's your first time having sex? How long after this do you have sex for the first time? And is it because you're in a band?
Yes. 18. So here's what I did after that. This is where people joke about OCD, but it's a real thing that I actually have. I did the thing through the reason why I didn't have my first kiss till I was 14 is because all through middle school, I was obsessed with the same girl. I was just like, I have a crush on this girl, and I'm going to have this painful, tragic, unrequited crush for which I never make a move all through middle school and just be filled with resentment and agony and tragedy the whole time, and forsaken of all others.
This girl for not kissing you.
Yes, and any girl that showed an interest in me, I was like, my heart already belonged to this girl.
Did she even know, did she even know this?
Existed.
Did she know this? She didn't know you existed.
No, and of course, at some point in like my 30s on Facebook, when we reconnect, and she's like, "Oh, I had a crush on you in middle school."
Oh my God! You're like, what?
Yeah. But yeah, so I did that like all through middle school, and then high school was a series of like ignoring the like people that would have probably been good matches and appropriate for me to date. Because once you're in a band, especially, like all of a sudden you go from being like this weird outcast to like, people are interested. But ignoring, because I would get laser focused. Like my sophomore and junior year, there was a girl that I was close friends with, and just perennially, to bring up Chris Rock like you did, friend zoned.
In the friend zone. Just
friend zoned. And she came to like all of our shows, and I had like a song about her. These are hardcore songs, so it's like cloaked in imagery, but
right.
Just friend zone the whole time.
And so you didn't want to be with anybody but her.
Nothing else would do.
Hate anybody else.
And I feel like there's something to that, going back to the whole big picture of it, right? Because it's like you're forcing yourself into this untenable situation.
Well, it's like sometimes like straight edge people go like super hardcore, like no drugs, no sex, no booze, no.
Yeah, I wasn't. They call that in California. I learned they call that the third stepper.
Okay.
You're a third stepper if you do that. I wasn't, it wasn't that. It was like, I'm tragically destined and intertwined to be with this person that doesn't want to be with me.
Do you ever get with her?
I'll just be upset. No.
You don't get with her?
No.
And you finally let her go?
Yes. And she's currently married with kids and lives in North Carolina. Married a dude from the military. But
you let her go sometime around, 18 or 19 or whatever.
Oh yeah.
You just realize you're never going to get with the other.
Yes. And I did finally end up with somebody my senior year in high school, which is who I lost my virginity to, and who I did meet because of doing the band and stuff.
Yeah.
and she was into animal rights and like stuff I was into. And we actually lived together after high school for a year or two, and broke up amicably and stayed cool. Like,
Right
over the years, we're like Facebook friends. She's married with kids, still in Indiana. But yeah, so it was cool. So it was like relationship. Like I didn't have like wild, crazy.
Did you tell her that it was that you were a virgin and it was your first time?
She was too.
Okay, so you both knew that you were virgins.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There was a long build up to it.
Yeah. That's good. It's always better that way.
Yeah. Lots of
you get it too quick and you just don't want it.
No, lots of
like
over the
said,
pants activity.
Dry humping, we called it out here in California.
So much.
So much dry humping. Jesus.
Endless.
As Lemmy said, the chase is better than the catch. Sometimes.
Exactly.
But so the first time that you have sex, is it everything you imagine? Is it like you're a champion, you last forever? Like,
no. It was definitely cool, and I'm like weirdo esoteric guy. So
and you're like sober, you're straight edge. Like the first time you have sex, you're not drunk or anything.
Oh yeah, and neither was she.
Yeah. Have you ever had sex?
Have
you ever had sex drunk in your entire life?
No, I've never been drunk.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah. You want to know how rigid and insane the straight edge thing can be? When I was 20, all of my friends that I came up with straight edge together as teenagers, one by one, as tends to happen around that age, they all started drinking and doing drugs and whatever, and growing out of the straight edge thing, or however you want to put it. And me, in a moment of like, again, I'm 20, right? I'd been straight edge since I was 14 or 15, and I'm 20. So I had a moment of like, is this what we're doing now? So I was like, well, I listened to House of Pain a lot at the time. I'm going to try a Guinness. I'm Irish. I listen to House of Pain. My brother was working the door at a bar so he could get my friends and I in, even though we were 20. And my brother gets me a Guinness, and I have one Guinness. And I decide afterwards, it's not for me. Whatever. It's just not my thing. It is now, I'm 47 years old now. I'll be 48 later this year. I was 20. There are people in Orange County right now who think I shouldn't be allowed to call myself straight edge.
Because you drank the Guinness back then?
I drank a Guinness in 1992 or 3. That's how rigid. And it's all made up. It's all made up rules. There's no holy book. There's no pope. But
Quran. There's no Quran on the straight edge lifestyle.
Yeah, a few years ago on my birthday, my buddy Lindsay Carmichael gave me my little straight edge tattoo on my hand.
Okay, cool.
And I posted a picture of it on Instagram. I was like, I had a killer birthday, got this tattoo. And a grown-ass man, friend of mine in his 40s, who's an attorney, posted a comment of the emoji. And so I texted him, and I'm like, dude, what's up with the emoji on my birthday? And he's like, well, dude, no offense, I love you, but like, you got a straight edge tattoo? Yeah. And he's like, but you're a sellout. I'm like, wait, what? He's like, yeah. And that's like some story that like followed through the circuitry of, and by the way, part of it's also because I don't lie about it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, when I was 20, I tried a beer, decided it wasn't for me. But
never smoked weed, never done cocaine, never did acid.
Yeah. And I've had people like Carl from Earth Crisis.
Pain pills. You never did like pain pills or Norcos or anything like that? Not
recreationally.
Okay, gotcha.
Once
like
after
for an injury or
once
something.
once after a liver biopsy.
Okay.
Some Valium.
Yeah.
I'm not like
Was it weird? Were you like, I don't like this feeling?
Yeah, it was super weird. I think it's the loss of control that I don't enjoy. But yeah, and by the way, I'm very, libertarian leaning, and I believe that all of that stuff should be decriminalized, and that it's all personal choice, and respect for to the degree that it's not inflicting injury or harm on others. And the way that it is criminalized is creating a system that is perpetuating violence and things that are hurting people. I think I literally think top to bottom it should all be decriminalized and monetized and regulated even to some extent.
Fuck yeah. Bringing that Colorado tax money, man.
Yeah, man. And I felt that way for a long time. Even as even at my most militant of straight edge, I was never like a prohibitionist. And some straight edge people you talk to they're like, yeah, very much so. Yeah. They want to ban alcohol, and I'm not for that at all. But it's funny. Yeah. To have like a 40 something smart, normal, he's got, he's a parent, right. A grown ass man, leave me a shitty Instagram comment because he's offended that I dare to call myself straight edge because I had a beer 27 years ago.
Am I mistaken this? Am I getting this wrong? Were you the manager for Bleeding Through when we took them out on tour?
I was. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and I was the manager for Throwdown when you took them on tour.
Right.
I technically still am, although they're not really active.
Right.
Yeah.
No, totally. No, I remember you and me and Brandon went out to like Mexican food after that god awful San Diego show that we played.
We did what was that burrito place?
Soma. We played Soma with Arch Enemy, and like everybody left after Arch Enemy played. There was 100 people. This is on the Blackening. Like fucking, there was 100 people who didn't give a fuck. I was livid. We ended the show early. Like fuck. I was like, fuck you guys.
It's so funny because I don't remember. I remember the show, and I remember us going to. It's called like Santino's or Santana's.
No, Soma. It was. Oh, I don't know.
The burrito place. Yeah. It was. Yeah, the venue was Soma, but I don't remember any part of the bad show.
Oh my god, I was fucking ready to kill.
I just remember the hang. So,
yeah, it was a great hang.
Just tell me it was an amazing show. I won't know the difference. It was the best show you ever played.
The hang was amazing. It was great. It was such a good hang.
Yeah.
I loved Bleeding Through. I fucking loved that band. God, the truth and This Is Love, This Is Murderous is just fucking brutal.
Hey, and that tour created children.
It did. It did. Oh yeah, Phil had his sights set from day one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I remember at one point Brandon was just like, bro, what's up with your guitar player, man? Like he's relentless. And I'm just like, I know, I'm sorry. Jesus. Like, fuck, I know.
Yeah, I had, definite older brother thing with Marta because, when I started managing them, I think I was just like 29 or 30 and she was like 20, 21 when she came into the band. And so, so we all kind of like big brothered her a little bit.
Totally.
And
every dude's trying to pick up on her.
Yeah. And especially
every dude outside of your band is trying to pick up on her.
Yes. And especially, and everybody within her band is trying to keep her in check too, in ways that are sometimes shitty. Like I remember we were all together once and she was like, hey, did you guys hear? Like this is like early days. She's like, I'm in Metal Hammer's 10 hottest women of metal.
Right. Oh, then she started making like all the Revolver covers after a while, right?
And I remember Brian Lepke, who was like the driest, most sarcastic dude in the band. She's like, yeah, I'm in like the top 10 Metal Hammer or whatever. And Lepke goes like, yeah, too bad there's only 12 chicks in metal. Like it was always like, just like a brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
But yeah, I bring this up because I remember when she met Phil and her talking about it and stuff, and because obviously I'd known her through her whole 20s, which is dating different people, and she was married at one point, and I remember having the vibe of like, oh, this is like a legit thing, like this is gonna like go somewhere. It's kind of wild.
Were you the manager? Because they had a different girl keyboard player before her, right? Were you the manager then?
Yeah, I was not. Her and I came on board right about the same time, actually.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for like This Is Love, This Is Murderous, that was a different
person played on This Is Love, This Is Murderous, but was out before the record even came out. So
gotcha.
Marta's actually in the pictures.
Oh, okay. Is she?
Okay. And did all of the touring and everything behind.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
But Molly, the original keyboard player, tracked on that record.
Gotcha.
Which became a point of contention as the manager a couple years later when I started getting the emails like, where's her royalties?
Yeah, right. Because
the band told me she was there for 2 days and she didn't do any of the touring,
That was a big record, right?
The arguments on both sides that can happen in those scenarios.
Yeah, and
Understandable.
after a successful album, like their
Yes.
fucking Bleeding Through was, I mean, they were the hottest thing on the fucking planet for a minute there. Holy shit!
Dude, and getting a Machine Head tour was a huge deal for us. Ozfest was a big deal.
Yeah,
Slayer and Manson.
right.
Yeah, there was a run there that was really, really great. And I have Brandon to thank for managing bands, because I was working at MTV and Brandon called me and said, my band I knew him from the hardcore scene. It's funny because we talked all about my high school band. We haven't talked about the band I was in. It was actually like a real band for a minute.
Yeah, gotcha.
But I was in
multi-band.
I was in a band called Burn It Down we were together from 97 to 2000. And
were they an influence on Bleeding Through?
yes, in the first Bleeding Through album, in the picture in the inside, Brandon's wearing a Burn It Down t-shirt.
Oh, okay. Oh shit.
And not to pat myself in the back, this is just more like knowing that people that listen to your podcast have no idea who I am, nor should they. But Howard Jones was like, I met him because he loved Burn It Down.
Oh, okay.
That was the first conversation we ever had. Doc Coyle, the first conversation we ever had was how much he loved.
Wow.
He said me and the singer from Dead Guy were the two best voices in hardcore, and I remember these things because they were like really.
I didn't even know you were in a band called Burn It Down. I got to go check this out now.
Well, this is going to bring us around to my first time meeting Robb Flynn story that you don't remember, which is funny, and it also reminds me that I need to remind
you might trigger a memory. There's so much useless information up
it's
here.
an embarrassing memory for me because it was a big faux pas on my part.
Okay.
I handed you a Burn It Down CD.
Okay.
And I was like, this is my band. No, it was in the studio while you were mixing the Burning Red, and I was there for Circus Magazine.
Oh, wow.
And I said this, we'll get into that because it's a funny faux pas that I made, and you were well within your rights.
Where were we mixing it at? At Larrabee? Larrabee on Santa Monica?
Yeah, because who mixed that record?
Terry Date.
That's right.
Yeah. Not that you'd ever know.
I guess so. Well, I didn't know California at the time. Because I didn't know California at the time because I still lived in Indy and was
okay.
Again, back in the days of budgets, Roadrunner flew me here.
Yeah.
It was the first or
second. Yeah, back when the Roadrunner had budgets.
Roadrunner flew me to Vancouver to go in the studio with Fear Factory for Obsolete for Alternative Press. And they flew me to California to go in the studio with Machine Head for Circus Magazine.
Wow.
And when Circus ran the story, it was the only time I ever did anything freelance for Circus. And I was so pissed off about it afterwards that I never wrote for them again. They ran the article with like 4 pictures of Logan.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Which is fun. We can laugh about now.
Right.
But
yeah, exactly.
The beginning of the Burning Red album cycle.
Yeah.
That was
yeah, not a good idea.
Cool.
Don't leave out the guy who wrote everything out of the magazine pictures.
Yeah, just a bunch of pictures.
And not have the guy who's not in the band anymore, right?
Yeah, that was the thing.
I don't even think I've seen this. 4 pictures of it just dawned on me.
It was like a bunch of, I might be exaggerating. I just remember there were like big pictures of Logan in the article, and I just being like
dude who's not in the band anymore.
Yeah, very recently, not like first album without him, like not a good look.
Yeah,
but
so you gave me the Burn It Down demo.
Yeah, well, I gave you our EP, and this was where the faux pas was. Is I was like, by the way, I have a band, and handed you the CD, and then the faux pas was I said, oh, hope you don't mind, but you might hear the riff from 10 Ton Hammer in here. And he just like made a face that was not stoked. And I realized as I said it, like, man, I thought that was going to come out like a compliment. It came out so shitty. And I just didn't bring it up again. Well, but literally, it was so dumb.
I was so high on cocaine. I have zero recollection of any of that. So I was literally
bringing us full circle to Riff Lift
every single day. He's fucking hanging out with Dean Carr, for fuck's sake, like cocaine. I mean, just he had like a dealer like who brought in this like ultra pure, insane fucking cocaine, and we were just
amazing.
Fucking
me, straight edge kid from Indiana, oblivious.
Yeah.
I would have had no idea that anyone was.
I could carry it well. It was a lot of years of practice.
I remember it was the first time I met Bori from Blabbermouth too.
Oh, okay. He would have been there. Yeah, so you would have been there. We probably would have done the interview in that weird little enclave with the fancy couch and the total Art Deco couch.
That was where,
like
17
feet long or something.
And speaking of, and shout out Bori, but I'm going to blow up his spot a little bit for being the tabloid news hound. I remember him pulling up in his car or whatever because he had something to do with Logan. He had some gossip for you guys. Okay. I forget. It wasn't like anything super bad, but it was like he had like a Logan demo, or it was like something where he was like. So blow up Bori's spot a little bit. He was getting the tabloids even before Blabbermouth was a thing. Getting the juicy dirt going. Human nature, I guess. But
what do you want to plug? Do you got anything you want to plug right now? I mean, you've got a lot of stuff going on. You got a lot of
too much stuff.
It's good. I mean, you're very fucking active. You got your God podcast. You've got Speak and Destroy. You've got the unbelievable compilation of album sales and streaming sales that you do.
You know what's funny is I thought when you were like, "Hey, you want to be on my podcast?" I was like, "Yes, of course." And then I was like, what does Rob want to talk to me about on his podcast? And I assumed it was going to be that. And we haven't talked about it at all.
That's what I was supposed to talk about. We just that was what I was going to start the whole conversation with. And then somehow we just went off on like a million other places. So
no, this is way cooler. I mentioned.
Does your list have a name? Do you have a name for your list?
Stream and Destroy.
Stream and Destroy. Okay.
Yeah, which was relatively new. It didn't used to have a name. It used to just be a few scans.
It's a subscription-based service where you can get very broken down details of album weekly chart positions, that the midweek chart positions, which is something you used to. I had to ask you. I'm like, what the fuck does this mean?
A few people asked. Yeah.
Why is it chart on Monday?
Yeah. So basically, what it is it's for those of us who are interested in, or working in, or adjacent to hard rock and metal, a collection of information, data from. As there are more and more ways to kind of count and measure the impact that a band is having, or a record's having, or a song is having, going through all of that information that's out there and trying to condense it down into a succinct, easy to digest, quick read picture of what's going on. Because once upon a time, if you wanted to know how a hard rock or metal album was doing, and you were to look at the Billboard chart, you have to kind of cherry pick. And I basically do the cherry picking for you. And then since I started the list, there's so many other ways, whether it's social media, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. There's a lot of different metrics that you can kind of look at and be like, how much. And to me, it's not so much about like who's bigger or who's smaller. It's more about what are people interested in right now? Like what's connecting, and for established bands, it's kind of like who's sustaining, or who's resurging, or whatever. That
AC/DC, unbelievable staying power,
right?
Like just unfucking imaginable staying power.
Yeah, and the genesis of it really came from being a manager.
Of course.
So yeah, that's how we started talking about that. Was so Brandon Schiapetti of Bleeding Through, who I knew through me being in my old band Burn It Down and having had played shows with his old band 18 Visions. We actually were on tour with In Flames, Nevermore, and Shadows Fall when we broke up. That was our final tour. We broke up in the middle of the tour. We toured with Dillinger. We did not. We did not finish the tour. We went home in Cleveland. Bad breakup. Yeah. And by the way, two of the guys from Burn It Down, the bass player and the drummer, are both gone now. Shout out Jason McCash and Bob Fouts, who went on to be in a doom metal band called the Gates of Slumber that, apart from me knowing them, is one of my favorite bands of all time. They were on Lee Dorian's label. And 3 or 4 of their records were like top 5 decibel album of the year. It's doom. So
get back to the list.
Yeah, they played in LA for like 40 people. But anyway, back to the list. So Brandon called me and was like, we just signed a Trustkill. We're about to go on tour with AFI. We know we're at the point where we need management. The managers we've been meeting with, we don't trust. They all seem like weirdo music industry weasels. You're someone who comes from where we came from, but you also work at MTV. So you're like in the mix of like the real music business. Would you be our manager? And I said, I've never managed a band before, so I'd feel weird taking money from you, and I have a job, but I'll give it a try. So let's try it for a few months, and if we both like it, then we can you guys can pay me and we'll figure that out. So that's how I started managing bands. And within a year, I was managing Throwdown, Zayo, Demon Hunter, and Tiger Army. And that was all through, those were all bands I already knew. And what would happen is people would call me and go, I heard you manage bands now. Why do you manage us? And it just kind of grew organically from there. And Demon Hunter, I still work with. Zeus, the producer, I've been with since like 2010. Throwdown's not really an active band anymore, but if Dave ever makes a record, I'll help however I can. I still chase royalties and, got his masters back on some of his records, and we got everything up on streaming. And, there's surprisingly still stuff to do even for inactive bands.
Right.
But the email list began when managing bands was kind of my full-time focus. And there were a lot of them that were all touring. As I started sending out the email to just the guys in the bands I managed as a means to give all of us a picture of where things stood. Because, from being in the band world, there's a phrase that we would use all the time, fake big. Because there were a lot of bands where it's like, this band seems like they're big, and not. You realize how much of it's positioning and hype and where they get put on festivals and whatever. But if they were to set up a headlining show across the street tomorrow, how many people are really going to come?
Right.
Like that sort of thing.
Totally.
And it was also self-serving for me, because as a manager, and this is just the reality, this is any business, I imagine, but the reality of bands is that no band, for anyone listening to this, that we look up to is satisfied where they are. And that's a good thing in so much as it drives ambition, and that pushes creativity, and it creates a work ethic, and we get great albums out of it. There's a lot of reasons why that's okay, that restlessness. But the flip side of that is every time we might look at a band and go like, man, those guys have it all. They're looking at the next band up the ladder like, how come they get everything? And it's like, there's always, and it's just my opinion, right? Like there's always this ladder that goes up, and it's like, it all goes up to like,
it's so true though. You always hear like Lars talk about U2 and how they like so much look up to like U2 because it's like, that's the level that's,
and we look at Metallica, we're like, that's
Metallica to us.
That's the top. Yeah. And he looks at U2, and U2 wishes they were the Beatles.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And John Lennon wanted to be bigger than Jesus. So it's like, that's where it ends. Like literally God, so yeah. So it was also a self-serving way for me as a manager for every time that I heard like, how come this band got on Rock Band and we didn't? Because,
right.
We did better than them with this or whatever. Like it was kind of a way to make all of our, they say 50% of managing is managing expectations, and just a way to manage all of our expectations to go like, well, look, here's the picture.
Yeah. So you started doing that. When did you start doing this?
What records?
10 years ago?
Probably 2008.
I would say like 13 years
2007 or 2008. Yeah. And it was originally just people in bands I managed.
And it was just Soundscan originally.
And it was just Soundscan.
Yeah. So like back then it would be so much simpler because you didn't have, you had basically iTunes metrics, CD sales, YouTube probably was irrelevant.
No. Yeah.
Social
YouTube
media
started in
was
2005.
Yeah.
It was irrelevant to
social
music.
media would have been fairly irrelevant. Maybe MySpace played
MySpace.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so
It was just record sales. And a lot of times it was already still really driven by first week. So people were really interested in like, well, what did bands do first week? And there also wasn't a lot of reporting about it. You didn't have all the metal media that you have now.
you couldn't even like, this was like kind of taboo information. This is before Spotify put all of the number, like you couldn't, if you got this information, there was no way you could put it out there because people would be pissed. Like Soundscan would be pissed. Like we're charging hella money to put this out. So you couldn't do that. So it was then like Spotify kind of flipped that around because now you can go, okay, Drake has got 40 million listeners a month.
You know what, Rob, I hadn't even thought about that. You make a really great point. I hadn't thought about that, how this is information now that's shared and kind of celebrated. And you're right, because it used to be information that you could really piss somebody off. Yeah, sharing it.
You'd get it and be like, don't get this out. Don't let this out. Because I would do that. I would keep tabs on other bands. Like I want to know what all the other fucking bands are doing.
Right, and in a lot, and sometimes
like
it's
the pop radio.
It's really just perspective.
Band.
Yeah. But you might have been looking. I mean, I remember, so my old band, we did a couple EPs. We did one full length, and around the time our full length was coming out, it was on a label called Escape Artist, which was a couple of guys who used to work at Relapse at the time. Their side label, and they put out the first record from the band ISIS. And some other friends of ours. It was a really cool little label, but I had lead singer expectations, and so I was always hitting them up about like, what about like, we want to get this tour and we want to get this, and I saw this, I just opened up Metal Maniacs. There's a full page ad for Soylent Green. Like we just played with them. Like what why aren't we in the, like I was being that guy a lot, and they were some of the first people, because they worked at Relapse, that were able to tell me like, dude, like a big Neurosis record is like 20,000 scans, right? And I'm like, what? Because in my mind, I'm like, Neurosis is just toured with Pantera.
Right.
They're rock gods,
right.
It's like, I had no concept, I just didn't know. You don't know the difference between this band or that band. And sometimes that's by design. But I think it's ultimately healthy if you're going to have longevity in this. If you're in a band, especially, and people that work around bands, to have, not to get necessarily caught up in counting and measuring and comparing, but just to understand the context of like, oh, okay, like you can breathe a little easier even.
Yeah. I find that I go through phases where like I really want to know what everybody's doing. And then there's sometimes, I subscribe to your thing, but like there's plenty of months where I just don't even look at it. Like I just don't want to know. Yeah. I don't care. I don't fucking care. I don't want to know. It'll make me like fucked up, and like it'll make me all like weird and insecure. And I'm like, I just don't want to know. Like I'm just better off not knowing. And I know that about myself, and I can say that, so I do, but I do. And I appreciate all the work. I know it's a lot of fucking work. I do appreciate, and I could probably speak for everybody who's listening to the podcast who does subscribe and has your thing. Like everybody appreciates especially now, because it's like ever since they broke down the fucking charts, I mean, it's fucking psycho now. That's one of the reasons I hate looking at it, because now there's just so many charts. I'm like, what fucking chart is? Who cares what chart this is? There are so many different places. There are so many things that are constantly changing. It is. I look at some of these, I'm not going to shit on anybody, but like sometimes like these bands will do like a big announce, like, oh my God, we're like number one here and number one here and number one. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, where is that? Okay. Like it's funny and I get it. Like, and it makes it sound bigger than it is. And of course that's what the music business is, right? A little bit of smoke and mirrors making you sound bigger than you are. But I mean, Andy Biersack and I had the number one book on Amazon, right, in memoirs of rock music, right? You know what I mean? Subset of the subset of the subset.
Yeah. I made the Instagram post that said number one Amazon.
That's right. But
then you just got to read the caption to get to.
Yeah.
So
funny.
It's part of the game, right?
I do got to get going here, but I speak for everybody who follows your list, man. Like your list is awesome. It's fucking your podcast awesome. Is awesome. Your podcasts are awesome. You got the guy. Shout out your podcast? What's the
yeah okay, so yeah, if you ryanjdowney.com is the best place to find all my stuff. I do a podcast called No Prize from God, which is conversations with creative people about belief, unbelief, and everything between. I've had people from all across the spectrum of belief on there. Anyone from Ryan Clark from Demon Hunter and Jesse Leach from Killswitch to Satir from Satyricon.
Nurgle,
Karen
Behemoth.
Crisis from Gospel of the Witches. Yeah, Nurgle from Behemoth. Blackie Lawless from Wasp. Anybody who I think, because when you look at the podcast category and religion and spirituality, you're going to get militant atheism, right-wing evangelicals, and maybe some new agey self-help stuff. And I wanted to create a space that's like, I want to have HR from Bad Brains talk to me about like his trip, which hasn't happened yet. But, a place where it's like these cool, interesting stories from these, from creative, interesting people, whether they're musicians, actors, filmmakers, whatever, who have some unique experience with life's big questions and have something to say about it. That's not just, you should believe in Jesus, or you should read this Richard Dawkins book, or not just the stuff we've heard, like I want like these more personal, visceral kind of like someone who saw a ghost. I don't know, I just want to trip out on this
the
stuff.
Metallica podcast,
Speak and Destroy is interviews about Metallica with great guests like Robb Flynn and Rob Halford and Lizzie Hale, and just anybody who.
Ron McGovney. You had Chad, James Hetfield's tech just recently.
Yeah, I had Chad on. I actually have not had Ron McGovney.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
I haven't.
Maybe you were talking about him or something.
He's TBD. But yeah, it's basically anybody who works with, has toured with, is influenced by, has been an influence on, is a peer, contemporary. Yeah, so it's all across the gamut from Avenged Sevenfold to Diamond Head and Anti Nowhere League, and just had somebody from Budgie on, and to folks like yourself who are a couple generations removed from the Bay Area and toured with and friends with, and it's been so much fun. About to do the 100th episode, actually. Rad.
That's awesome.
And and then I have one more podcast called Pop Curse, which is done less frequently, but still a fun passion project. It's musicians talking movies. So I had the guys from Twisted on to talk about John Carpenter's Halloween. Spencer from Ice Nine Kills came on and talked about The Shining. Blothar from Gwar talked about RoboCop. If you want to pick a movie, I'd love to have you on to talk about any movie you want for 30 minutes. And then the last thing is I've been doing a lot of stuff with Knotfest lately. Knotfest.com during the pandemic transitioned from not just a destination for their festivals, but as a media brand of news about.
Yeah, they've got bees on there, and so you're on there now.
Yeah, so yeah, I do a series on there called The Disc Dive, where an artist and I go through every record in their discography.
Oh wow!
Their current bands, former bands, solo projects.
Holy
Obviously,
moly.
you're on my list for that too. But yeah, but speaking of Miles Kennedy, I had Miles Kennedy on the Disc Dive. Speaking of Kiss, I had Ace Frehley on. Andy Biersack did one. Caleb from Beartooth, and they've been a lot of fun, especially when you get into those like when we start talking about Roadrunner United or something. When you get into those like weird, lesser explored parts of the catalog, it's fun. So yeah, that's all my stuff. And then I manage the producer Zeus, who produced and mixed the last couple Rob Zombie records, the last 2 Queensryche albums, almost every Hatebreed record, Hatebreed, a bunch of their stuff. Suicide Silence, Whitechapel, Bleeding Through, Throwdown, Demon Hunter. And he also scored Rob's most recent movie and is doing the score for the movie that Rob is semi-secretly directing as we speak. Cool. So that stuff's so cool. And then Demon Hunter. Check out Demon Hunter. And of course, we have a bunch of connections there that we didn't even talk about, because you've done Ryan Clark has done work with Machine Head.
He has. He's
Grammy-nominated designer and singer for Demon Hunter.
Yes. Well, dude, thank you for being on No Fucking Regrets. It was awesome. It was a good 3 hours. That was a good 3 hour chat right there.
Holy shit, it was.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All good.
I could talk to you forever, dude. I'm honored to be on here. As you know, I'm a huge Machine Head fan from way back, and I always appreciate our friendship. I appreciate you being one of the first to come out and support the newsletter when I started asking for a little money for it. I was very pleasantly surprised by how many people stepped up and how fast. And
Fuck yeah,
you were one of the first on board. So
good
thanks
shit,
for that, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, that right there, Ryan Downey, not to be confused with the other Ryan Downey. And no fucking regrets.
With Robb Flynn.